6:46, and we are out of closed executive session, and we will reconvene the regular meeting of the Board of Education with the pledge to the American flag. We already did it. We overdid it today, but thank you again. Okay. I did it early. We're not going to do it again. Okay. Roll call, please.
All right, Mrs. Brenner.
Here.
Mr. Booker.
Here.
Mr. Herrera.
Here.
Mrs. Haupt.
Here.
Ms. Mayville.
Here.
Mrs. Whitcomb.
Here.
Mr. Zickert.
Here.
As we continue to start the regular meeting of the board, as a reminder, all board members are expected to follow our approved meeting norms and board protocols as follows. I, as the board president, will preside over the meeting, and we, as the board, will adhere to board policies, board processes, and board procedures. We will model the behaviors expected of students, staff, and community members. We have an obligation to express our opinions and respect others' opinions. We will remain business-oriented, objective, and ends-focused in our work. We will assume positive intent. We will listen alertly to the discussion. Next on the agenda is the approval of the agenda. Are there any items on the agenda any members of the board would like to amend or move?
Yes, I will pull out the personnel report from consent.
And that is item,
That is item number 3.
You can actually do that under.
Oh, we can do that then?
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't think you want to pull it out now.
Yeah, okay, we'll just do that
we're doing,
when we get it.
okay, so we're doing later? So
Yep.
no others? Okay. Hearing none, do I have a motion and a second to approve the agenda of the regular meeting of the Board of Education on April 15th, 2024 as presented?
So moved.
Second. Member Herrera made a motion and Member Mayville seconded the motion to approve the agenda of the regular meeting of the Board of Education on April 15th, 2024 as presented. Discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Herrera.
Aye.
Ms. Mayville.
Aye.
Mrs. Whitcomb.
Aye.
Mr. Zickert.
Aye.
Mr. Booker.
Aye.
Mrs. Haupt.
Aye.
Mrs. Brenner.
Aye. Motion passed, 7-0. Next up, we have our student council comments, and we have one student council member that's here this evening. If you would like to come up and give us a report on what's happening in your schools, and the other we have attached to view after this evening.
Okay, so here's my report for April. From Lincoln, they had a very successful fine arts night and book fair the Thursday before spring break. Kindergartners will have the opportunity to have a local author, Carrie Asner, come next week to read her book, Blueberry Blue Bubbles, and create a bubble portrait with her. In addition, thanks to the generosity of a donation from First United Methodist Church, all students will get a signed paperback copy of the book to take home. Lincoln's PVO is holding a dance for families on April 19th. Caledonia. All is well in Caledonia. They just have received the furniture for their outdoor classroom. A group of students in both 1st and 4th grade are going to be working on designing the space and getting the rest of the school involved in some way. Meanwhile, 3rd through 5th graders are finishing up their IAR testing, and they're all ready for the weather to get warm and so they can be outside. Seth Whitman. Seth Whitman has been very busy this month. Here are some highlights. 3rd through 5th grade students rocked their IAR test. They wrapped up a food drive prior to spring break. 225 items were brought to Empower Boone Food Pantry, and students participated in viewing the solar eclipse on April 8th. From Belvedere North, it has been a very fun month at North as spring sports are in full swing. We also have had our spring play of The Great Gatsby this past weekend, and overall, our students' behavior has been great this year as we have had a 55% decrease in major referrals from a year ago through 3 quarters. We are excited to start celebrating the class of 2024 over the next month and to finish the school year strong. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming this evening. We appreciate you. Okay, because of timing, we're going to go a little out of order with the agenda due to Mr. Keith Kelly, who will be meeting with us shortly to review our special education review program update. So we will jump ahead to our board committee reports until he is ready and with us. So first, we'll have our board committee reports with business services. The meeting took place on April 2nd. Mr. Herrera or Mr. Booker, do you have anything you'd like to highlight or share regarding the business services minutes?
Not really. No, I mean, we're going to vote on some items in consent and roll call, so.
I was just saying, yeah.
Okay. Next is educational services that took place on April 3rd. Ms. Mayville or Ms. Haupt, do you have anything you would like to highlight or share regarding the educational services minutes?
No, we've got some agenda items coming up. We can
discuss them under those items. And lastly, policy and personnel was on April 11th. Mr. Zickert, do you have anything you'd like to highlight or share regarding the policy and personnel minutes?
No, I think most of the ones on there were ones I mentioned to take a look at before, so I think it'd just be redundant.
You will also see on the revised agenda, several policies were added after the previously released agenda based on policy and personnel committee. We met the evening the original agenda was released. So as stated on the original agenda, based on the feedback and recommendations from the committee, items on the agenda could have been held for the May meeting. However, they were forwarded on and revised the agenda for this April meeting. Per the committee's recommendation, 13 policies have been added for first reading this evening, and after an opportunity for questions or comments may be brought back to the board in May for final approval. At this time, does anyone have any questions or comments regarding the first reading of any of the policies listed from numbers F4 to F16 for the policy committee and or Dr. Shug? Yes, keep going. He's not here? No, it's just her? Okay. So, all right. At this time, members of the public and employees of District 100 may make public comments. As a reminder, any person appearing before the board is expected to adhere to the board, address the board only at the appropriate time and follow the directives of the board president to maintain order and decorum, identify oneself, limit comments to 3 minutes, and conduct oneself with respect and civility towards others, and otherwise abide by board policy 8:30, visitors to and conduct on school property. At this time, we have Misty Coriel, if you'd like to approach the podium.
Everybody's thrilled. I'm going to take this opportunity to pick up where I left off, which was talking about the lack of answers we had during the last town hall with regard to funding and impact fees and the different budgets that would theoretically be used to fund these renovations and the different plans that we have. So I think that we actually deserve to see some of that, in some sort of format that is understandable to the layperson, so that the community is aware of what's going to be coming when their taxes increase, right? So again, I'm going to reiterate, right? Our facilities are sufficient to house and meet the needs that we have as they are. We do not need a $22 million early childhood education facility, right? We already have bus driver shortages, right? We've got bus drivers complaining about the behavior of the young kids as they're being bused to and from. We're going to have to hire additional staff. I'm wondering if all of the additional costs for all of this additional busing has been considered as part of this plan for the $22 million if we're going to put it at a central facility. It's just a question. So I'm also curious to know what part of this information that was provided as part of the agenda, right? What part of the SALSA chart identifies the impact to student performance, right? How does any of it tell us that we're going to start increasing the numbers on these charts, right? When I ran for school board, I had a very specific conversation with a very specific question about the strategic plan. What is it going to tell us? What do we get out of it? As I understand it, we are still waiting for the information to come out of that, an action plan, right? At what point do we start pulling the big levers that are going to impact how our children are being educated, right? I'm not saying that the teachers are doing a poor job. I do not think that the responsibility lies with them. But at what point do the people in this room that are making the decisions start getting held accountable for the continuing decline? When do we get to start seeing these numbers increase, right? When do we start to get reports and have huge meetings and bring people together to discuss how do we address that problem? When does the community get to get involved in a significant way to that part of the conversation, right? When? That's what I want to know the answer to. When does that happen? Thank you.
Thank you. If there's anyone further that would want to approach the board at this time, please come forward and state your name. All right, I apologize for going out of order. We will shift back at this time to previous agenda item that we had. And at this time, Dr. Keith Kelly and his staff will present to the board the key findings of the Special Education Review of Programs approved by the board at the November 2023 board meeting. Dr. Kelly will highlight. We're giving you an introduction right now. If you just give me just a second. Dr. Kelly will highlight those recommendations from the program review, and the administration will return to the Educational Services Committee with a proposal for prioritized next steps based on the recommendations from the program review. So I'll turn it over to Dr. Shuck. I'm not sure if you wanted to give anything further before they jump in this evening.
Hi, Dr. Kelly was with us at our Educational Services meeting where he gave us an initial walk through the slides that he will be walking through with us this evening. I think really important to note, he's going to give us the big picture items that as a district were themes of the special education study that were completed. We then will be taking that information and returning to the board, we hope in June, with a prioritized plan from those recommendations about how we will move forward and take action on the steps recommended by Dr. Kelly and his team. So we had many meetings with Dr. Kelly, who he and his team spent a great deal of time here in the district and at our sites, and he's going to talk about what they saw.
All right, well, good evening, everyone. It's nice to see all of you there. I can see all of you in the board table. I have with me, hopefully you can see them as well, I have Jerry Toski. Jerry is the founder of this company and part owner. I also have with me Susie Dean. Susie was one of my teammates on this project. Jerry actually is a former superintendent in the Cleveland area, which is how I got to know Jerry a few years ago. And Susie currently is the superintendent for special services on this project. And Susie is working in New Jersey. I am a retired superintendent. I was in education for 40 years. I spent a dozen years as a teacher, a dozen years as a principal, and a dozen years as a superintendent. That leaves four more somewhere in there, but probably an assistant superintendent for a few years as well. So I just want to say thank you for having us there this evening to give an overview of what the time we spent here, what we saw, what we found. And I first want to say thank you very much for the opportunity to work with your district. And I do want to emphasize this. We met so many wonderful people. And Dr. Shaw, your team, all the folks there, welcomed us with open arms. They were honest with us, they were forthright, and most of all, they were very passionate about what they do. And really had a very deep interest in really making improvements to not only special education, but to your district overall. So a lot of wonderful people that are highly invested in what they do, highly invested in your community, and absolutely love the kids. So thank you for that opportunity. So I'm going to go ahead and try to project my Google Slides presentation. All right, now see if this will work and come up.
And board, you do have these slides in your.
Okay. Oh, yeah. Okay. It should be up here in a second. All right. Can you see it? Because I cannot see you right now.
We are unable to see your presentation.
Oh, you are? Okay. Well, I don't know what to say about that.
All the board members do have the presentation in our board packet, so we're able to follow along if you're unable to get it presented at this time.
Okay. So then let me see if I can get out of it so we can at least see you. Okay. Because I can see it on my screen, it's supposed to pop up in Google Meets somewhere on the screen somewhere. You have. Just give me a second here. Go back to me. It's just cut out. Am I still there?
Yep.
Yes.
I am there. Okay. Coming back in. And there I am. Okay. Here's
Yeah.
let's see. Should be better. All right. No feedback right now. All right. So you have the slides in front of you, so I'll just go through them. First, I want to talk about the purpose of the study. Of course, the purpose was to examine and analyze several facets of the special education program and provide recommendations for continuous improvement. We looked at several areas, as you can see on the slide, and if you'll notice, these areas are really commensurate with your strategic plan. We did that intentionally. We organized this report and did the study based on these categories. Now, we did add leadership to this, so one of the categories is leadership is what we looked at. Academic achievement and growth as part of your strategic plan categories, learning environment, community partnerships, premier workforce, operational resources, and then at the end of the report, we add what we call getting started, some things that we think you ought to do first. And of course, those are suggestions. If you turn the page, the next slide should be gathering the data. So really we take a two-pronged approach to gathering the data. We gather qualitative data as well as quantitative data. In this project, you may see my wife just walk through the background. It's late here. An hour later. So, with the qualitative data, what we gathered that is we did about 14 to 15 focus groups. We visited every school. We walked into probably the majority of special education classrooms and just spent 5 to 10 minutes in each of those classrooms. And I want to tell you, your teachers were very welcoming, wonderful. And we had informal conversations as we moved around the buildings and talk with teachers and principals. We gathered a lot of insight in that kind of informal way as well. On the quantitative side of things, we looked at a lot of information, a lot of what you provided us. Of course, we do our own research online. But we looked at budgets, financial, staffing patterns. We were asked to take a look at your special education leadership structure, your student achievement results, the programs, the various programs, and related services you have. We took a deep dive into your demographics, your disability types, and we did a lot of comparisons, and you'll notice this in the appendices. We did quite a bit of comparisons to your local, state, and national school districts that you would want to compare yourselves to, and that we might find useful too. So once we gather all the data, we really start looking at patterns, and then based on those patterns, we make a series of recommendations in those categories that I described later. You'll see those come up here again in a couple of minutes. So if you turn the page to the report itself, the report is structured in this way. There's an introduction, There are what we call the essential study themes and questions, so there are a list of questions that we ask ourselves that we list in the report so you can know what we're looking for, what we're looking at. We provide demographic study of your district, an executive summary of what we found in general. And then we get into the recommendation sections and make very specific recommendations on what we thought might be useful for you in your journey of improvement. And then of course, to get started suggestions and then the appendices. And I do want to emphasize something about your journey. Our report, while we feel that it will be very useful to you, they are recommendations. What you decide to do with them is really your decision, of course, but we hope will bring great value as you think about how to not just special education, but your entire district. The special education is not a separate entity from your district. Each is interdependent on the other for success. And I think I found that true not only as a special ed teacher, but as a superintendent. And I think my colleagues probably nod their heads on that one as well. Turn the page. We have a commendation section. So like I said earlier, we met many wonderful people, saw many wonderful things. So you should be proud of those things. And I'll run them down very quickly, and I'll make a comment about some of the groundwork that you've already done for improvement that I think Dr. Sharp and the team, should be commended. You can see there's more of these in the document itself. I just pulled out a few. Very dedicated and caring staff. They love the kids, as I've mentioned. There is parent satisfaction. There's no question that when we spoke to parents, the parents felt that their children are cared for, and the teachers and the paraprofessionals that work with their children really care about their kids. There's a real appreciation for diversity in your district. Many people see this as right. Your related services are excellent. You have many talented leaders and staff. And you have a strong desire to improve. And I think that's the key. All of you individually should be commended for taking the time to bring us in and to do some self-reflection and saying, okay, what's some other set of eyes look like when they come in to see how can they tell us how to improve. I myself hired this company when I was a superintendent. It was not a conflict of interest at the time. I realized I ended up working for American Educational Consultants, but I did a few years after the study we did to come to work. But we found it very useful in our journey for improvement as well. There's a commitment to developing a clear vision and focused plan for improvement. That is essential for all the work that you're going to be doing moving forward. Staff appreciate the school district. There's a desire to expand programming for special needs kids. Excellent facilities, assistive technologies. Your custodial staff should be commended for how well you take care of your facilities. There's great collegiality among a lot of people. And special education is well funded. Thanks to all of you. So there's a lot to be proud of. I do want to say that I just want to point out a couple of other things before we move on here about really some of the foundational work you've done already and had done before we showed up on the scene I think improve special education services to disabilities. Your move toward inclusion, while it is a significant issue, we believe in our estimation, and I think the research around our organization is the right thing to do for students. So that was already started. There's some work to be done there, but it's already started. Understanding what peace restrictive environment is, I think that work to be done. emphasizing the importance of tier one interventions
and
and
really
really
developing
developing
MTSS.
MTSS.
Tier
Tier
one
one
interventions
interventions
are
are
starting to be
stressed,
are
stressed
among your
among your
staff,
staff,
and I think
and I
you
think
have
you
a
have a
good
good
MTSS
MTSS
model.
model.
Supporting
Supporting
co-teaching.
co-teaching.
Your
Your
co
we saw several outstanding
co-teachers,
co-teaching
co-teaching
situations
situations,
that we did a great job with his
reasonable
reasonable
caseload
for your teachers. I think that's a key
in
helping teachers
find
find the
the
time
time
to
they
do
need
what
to
they
do
need
to
to
spend
do,
more
spend
time
more
with
time with
students.
students.
So
So
really
really
finding
finding
balance in
balance
a
in a
caseload
caseload
was
was
awesome.
awesome.
Your
Your
out of district
placements
placements
are
are
really
really
good
good
shape.
shape.
You
You
see
see
a
a
little
little
trend
trend
up,
up,
but
but
that's key because that saves
the
district
district
money
over
excuse me, over time.
all of
All of
your
your
special
special
ed
ed
data,
data,
is
is in line with state national averages,
with the
with the
exception
exception
of
of
gap
your gap
achievement.
achievement.
Something
That's a major area of improvement.
Staying out of due process litigations,
As I
as I
mentioned
mentioned
here,
here,
is
really
important.
and you're
And you're
working
working
already
already
to
to
improve your IE.
So
So
that
that
along
along
with
with
the
favorable
favorable
class
class sizes,
I
I
think
think
there's some
there's
good
some good
foundational
foundational
pieces
pieces
for
for
you
you
to,
to
continue
continue
moving
moving
toward
toward
improvement.
improvement.
All right, if
All right,
we
if I
go
go
ahead
ahead
and
and turn the page,
to
we'll
the
get to the
recommendations,
recommendations.
and I'll
And I'll
go
go
through
through
these
these,
because
I'm sure you're gonna read these.
So I
So I
won't
won't
elaborate too deeply.
I'm
Then when
gonna
I
finish
finish
for all of this.
I'll
I'll
take some time for some questions.
questions.
So
So
one of
one of the
the most
important
important
pieces
pieces
is
is leadership.
leadership,
Okay.
okay?
In the
In the
report,
report,
while we
we
weren't
weren't
asked to do this, we
we
typically
typically
do
do
this
this
anyway
because,
there's a
there's
close
a close
connection
connection
between
between
special
special
education
education
and general
and general
education.
education.
So we offer a district distributed leadership framework. And what that is really all about is engaging the talent in your district to really begin to innovate, solve the issues, and to discuss what you want another to be better. Within that, we provide a special education distributed leadership framework. We suggest that special education strategic plan for continuous improvement. Separate from the plan you have, but connected to the one you have. So
So very pointed, very detailed, give your staff
a
a
real
real
roadmap
roadmap
for
for
improvement.
improvement.
We make
We
some
make some
recommendations
recommendations
around
around communication and disability for leadership.
We make some
We make some
recommendations
recommendations
for
for
improving your
MTSS system.
That's the
That's the
multi-tier
multi-tier
system
system
of
of
supports.
supports.
We make
We
some
make some
recommendations
recommendations
around
around
accountability
accountability
for the
for the
kinds of
kinds of
things
things
you want to improve.
improve.
We also
We also make recommendations for IEP writing, because that's critical,
and then
and then some recommendations around using data
to make
decisions,
to
to
drive
drive
the
decision-making
process.
processes.
Relationships are key
key
in
in
everything.
everything.
It's the
It's the
foundation.
foundation.
The
The
data
data
really
really
helps
helps
to
to
make
make
decisions.
decisions.
So
So again,
all of that is to say, engaging the talent in your district,
district,
that
because
you
you
have
have
a lot of,
will
take you a long way
for improvement.
So go
So go ahead and turn the page.
And
And this is one of your categories, academic achievement and growth.
And the
And the things that we list here when we give recommendations
are
all really meant
to do a
to do a
couple.
couple of things.
One is
One is I'm sure you're overall, you are
wanting
wanting
to
to
improve
improve
student
student
achievement. I'm
I'm sure
sure.
of that.
Not
Not only
only
with students with disabilities, but in your general education as well. Another area of challenge for you is the gap
in
that
achievement
exists between students with disabilities and your general education students.
So
So we provide recommendations in these areas here that we believe and that most schools experience when you do these things well,
you
you
begin
begin
to
to
see
see
achievement
achievement
increase
increase
and
and
the
the
gap
gap
narrow.
narrow.
Okay?
Okay, and I've talked about some of these things already.
Your
Your MTSS system, operating at fidelity, your universal design for learning program. It's a terrific program. I've had experience with it, and it works very well with MTSS.
IEP goal writing, I mentioned literacy. We provide some recommendations on developing, getting some folks together to develop a literacy framework for your entire district that includes students with special needs. The special education curriculum, we spent some time on this one because it needs continuity, it needs dual relevance. Co-teaching or co-teaching models of excellent. You should keep those robust and keep encouraging and moving those forward and increasing those. And social and emotional learning. In this case, that behavioral needs that your district have, and some of the frustrations that some of your staff have when students are acting out. Okay. So again, these things, when implemented with fidelity, there's a real effort for them can help improve student achievement overall. I think you all know that. But we'd like to see more intentionality from all of you in getting that done. So the next page, if you want to turn, that's the learning environment. So we make some recommendations that continue with special education programming. Already there have been talked about classes for students with emotional needs and students with autism. Your continual programming as you move toward inclusion has some gaps. And we address those gaps in the report. And I think you'll find that interesting. Transitioning students from not only from elementary to middle to high school, but we make some recommendations for transitioning students post high school. That would be students with disabilities. Testing English learners, we provide some recommendations of some tests that can be used in the language of origins that might help provide a better picture and more accurate data for some of your students, so not to misidentify or over-identify students particularly with learning disabilities. And we provide some recommendations for the extended school year. We think that it's possible to double maybe the time of your extended school year to get those kids active learning throughout the summer, so when they come back in the fall, they're good to go. Again, what we want to stress to you here is finding a balance of programming based on the needs of the students with disabilities. That's always the challenge in school districts. You have your programs, and then you have your students. Do your programs meet the needs of the students fully? That's always the challenge for all of us, is to find that balance. Okay, the next section is family consumer partnerships, family and community partnerships, That's another, again, one of the categories. So, we love talking with parents that came to our focus group. They were very informative. They love their school district. They're happy with their teachers. But they did have some suggestions and some ideas, and we have some as well. So, one of the things that they talked about was being educated on how special education works. That there are a number of parents that just don't know how to access the system. So we make some recommendations around parent information, education nights. Keeping parent informed through newsletters, social media. The website is a useful tool as well. When it's up to speed. And then helping them get connected with community agencies that can also educate and provide resources for the state. Now, I know some of this is already being done, but I think we want to see more of this. Okay. You have an interesting community. It was really growing up in Chicago, myself, and having been out that way many times, but not for many years. And it was neat to be out there. And you have a lot of business community partnership opportunities that. And I thought a very interesting suggestion came right from one of the parents. Our support groups for siblings that has students who have siblings that have disabilities. So I thought that was a really interesting one. I don't know that takes place there in the home here. At least nobody knew of it. Okay, if you'd like to turn the page again, we'll get to your workforce. And really our recommendations here are all about the things we've talked about, but really designing a professional, I call it professional learning, a lot of people call it professional development, but a professional development program that is A, aligned with your strategic plan, and B, laser focused on the needs of each teacher. And you try to customize the program to do that. Now, I've seen it done. I did it myself when I was a superintendent. I did it with my team, and it was spectacular. It is really possible. You just chip away at it, and we give some suggestions on how to do that, some recommendations on how to do that, on all of these issues here that I've already talked about. One very important thing that we deeply believe in are the notions of professional learning communities, and those operating with fidelity, and that's really important. Some of your staff do, they were, some of them didn't. Some PLCs operate close to fidelity, others don't. But what's really important there is that PLCs, and this gets back to student achievement, are all about instruction in the classroom. So we make some suggestions, some recommendations there as well. But making these issues laser focused on needs and on your strategic plan will create the premier workforce. You have, like I said, you have talent, you have people yearning for growth, yearning, which is just the right thing. And they have ideas if you bring them together. Okay, turning to operational resources, the next page. Special education budget, you fund special education very well, kudos to you. We know that you're transitioning to another system, so the CFO is working with folks to educate them on that new system, which is awesome. I know that's a shortage of itself. Paraprofessional deployment. We did see an overusage or that you had too many paraprofessionals. We don't see that in the data. But we do make some suggestions on maybe being more efficient with your deployment. ESY programming, I've talked about that a little bit. Your contracted service costs, we thought that they were perhaps a little too high. We make a recommendation for you to go ahead and benchmark those more deeply and do a little bit more explanation on those. I mentioned your out-of-district placements slightly up, so you might want to watch that trend, but you do a really good job with that. And your district per pupil expenditure is right in line with the state and locally the state and okay, turn the page. Okay, so this is some of the issues I think that kept popping up over and over. And I just wanted to make it here. Inclusion, I've mentioned that. There needs to be more meetings of the minds, more discussion around what does it really mean, and what does it look like out here, and what's best for the students. Of course, that goes hand in hand with research for the environment. The 70-30 law in Illinois is always something peers are wrestling with. So that's make some recommendations along those lines of perhaps how to solve some of that. But I think that really comes down to some business rules and some real honest conversation around what that really means and how that's operationalized. Behavioral issues, this is one of the things I think that cause a lot of frustration. As the push for inclusion happens, and students who are just cannot handle it are acting out, because very frustrating for the kids and the staff. So, again, more conversation around that. I put collaborative versus top-down, but that again speaks to the whole distributed leadership engaging the talent in your district. That helps build the ownership to where you want to go with respect to what you want to achieve for your strategic plan. And then of course accountability. And really having some hard conversations about how you're going to hold each other accountable for getting the work done. And I don't mean you sitting around that table, I mean all of you. What's leadership's responsibility? What are teachers' responsibility for one another? What's staff's responsibility for one another? What is the responsibility of leaders and teachers sitting down and holding each other accountable for where you want all in the interest of students? All in that interest, all roads have to lead to that. Student engagement. It's not personal, it's getting in touch with the kids. Okay. So, only the last page is getting started. And we just, I'm sure Dr. Sharkey will decide how to get going. We've already got going on some things, but we think these are the foundational pieces that are, but these are really important issues that need in place, to really start working and go, with full momentum. All right, so with that, I'm happy to take any questions. And certainly I see here who went through a lot of the financials, so the budget issues, and we're here to answer whatever questions you may have this time.
Yeah, I remember talking back a long time ago, and whenever you ask for a study like this, there's always trepidation about what you're gonna get back. Is it gonna be useful? Is it not gonna be useful? Is it gonna be telling you what you wanna hear, or be overly critical and just say, what you're doing is a bunch of baloney anyway, or something useful? And I will say, after reading the slides and things like that, I thought it was a pretty balanced report that reflected reality as I saw it. It doesn't mean it's always reality, but reality as I saw it or anticipated it. So there weren't any huge surprises for the most part. There were some, obviously. I'm not that intimate with some of the goings on that you guys got to see. But I was wondering if, I think when you talk about getting started, because that's what we have to do. We have to get started. We can lament what it was like before, but that's not going to do us any good other than lament about what we did before. What we have to do is get started on why we want to move positively forward. So do you think that from what you saw, the notion of, I remember the days of RTI when people weren't that was a difficult transition then, and now inclusion is another area like that. Do you think initially the training part is important for not only the spec ed teacher, but the teachers after? I think the first part probably might be the plan, maybe, having the strategic plan as you alluded to. But, letting these people know how to do it, when to do it. There's help there if you don't know how to do it and where to get that help and things like that. Are those things we should maybe look at initially?
Critical. Absolutely critical, and I think you said it very well. For special education teachers and general education teachers, particularly in tier one, right, interventions. And you have some folks that do it very well. You also have some folks that are resistant. Okay, you know that. So
how you all get on the same page. That's why we offer these other frameworks to get people to the table and talking about how you get on the same page and then committing to fidelity, committing to accountability. And that's really important. And I want to say this about getting started, this is my own personal belief. Transformation, and I've been blessed to have been part of transforming a school district. And transformation is messy, and two, it doesn't happen in a linear fashion. It's kind of like Slinky. Remember the old Slinky, for any of you old enough? I remember Slinky that goes up and down, right? Or continuous spiral. That's kind of what the work of improvement is like. It's not linear. It's a continuous spiral of trying, doing, reflecting, trying again, discussing, talking. And many things can happen at the same time. Many different kinds of things can happen at the same time. So I think you raised, I think you're spot on with what you said. I love what you said. It gives me goosebumps, actually. So it's good. Thank you. Susie's laughing at me, but I get passionate about these things. Anyway. Any other questions?
As a board, what do you think the most important thing is for us to do to support? I mean, this is a big project, this is a lot of work. So as a board, what do you think the most important thing is, or most important things are that we can do to support this work and facilitate this work?
That is a great question. So I'm a board member, okay? But I've worked with boards. And so I'm going to give it to you from the superintendent's hat, okay? Some of the things are already doing, right? The facilities are great, they're the little ones. The new ones are terrific, the spaces are provide that. You've got a great superintendent. You have a new superintendent, CFO within 3 years or so. I think supporting them is critically important to it. But also continuing to fund special ed, having a tremendous understanding of the strategic plan. You will see it in the distributive leadership framework for the district. One of the things we talk about in there is your involvement in the process. And it's a little non-traditional in that there are opportunities for you, many opportunities for you to be involved in the education of what's going on, so you know in detail, so you can better speak to your community about what's happening. And that is your staff about what's happening. So, and that's the other important piece. Your leaders, all of your leaders, okay, formal and informal, in the buildings, when they take this on, they're going to need support. It is important that when people approach you in the grocery store, call you on the phone, come to your house and more, that you really have an understanding of how you're going to respond to those movements. When people are really being highly critical of something that may be going on. So if you know the direction, you know how hard your team is working, then what you say to those people is going to be critical. Because everything you say goes back. And I know that some of that has already gone on, because people were very forthright with us. But that comes with frustration. And that comes without, kind of a framework and structure where things can get talked about professionally. So everybody be in the same mindset of student achievement and growth. That's all leading in that direction. So, I think that's going to be, those things are going to be really important for you as a school board moving forward. And make recommendations on how you can be better educated on what's going on. Because you should be in the know on this as you take this on.
When you look at this, from the global aspect, I mean, I liked your analogy of, you know, I mean, because part of it was the trust and all this stuff that you alluded to in there, a lot of things like that. But I like the part where you talked about people want to know they're doing it with you. You're not doing it they're not getting it done to them. But when we look at the global aspect of the board, and I think this is where we, unfortunately, you know, for whatever reason, we may disagree once in a while. Maybe it'd be nice to get a different perspective. Is that as we look for accountability and as we look to talk to the things you do, and you as a former superintendent would know better than most, where is the appropriate level? How does the board try and do that and keep the hands-off approach kind of too, without micromanaging, but still trying to keep at that level of accountability all at the same time?
Great question. You do have to be responsible, right? You're superintendent and you're CFO. And so, and I'm not suggesting this, and I hope Dr. Shaw doesn't text me something nasty in a day or two, but when I throw this out there, I line my own evaluation based on our strategic plan. And the board held me accountable for that. But they gave me time, right? These things are not done in 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, or 5 years even. You know, they've got to be pumped out, and things have to be able to evolve with the board. And I think once you see the work that people are doing, and you're being educated along the way, you get an opportunity to ask questions, and they see that you're interested in that kind of thing, that really raises the trust and the accountability in a very constructive manner. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, thank you. It was a very good answer.
Any other questions? You know, what are the other things we did too that I think were terrific board? You know, they had goals as well, and we worked on them together. So we could all get better, right? We could all get better. While we were leading improvement, we were also asking ourselves to get better. And staff knew that. Because at board meetings like this one, we made it known. Okay.
Thank you for your time this evening. I don't think anyone has any further questions, but we really appreciate your time and insight with us this evening.
Okay, thank you. And I just want to, pretty much wrap it up. We always say, Dr. Shaw, to all the superintendents who work with the districts, anywhere down the road, this is not a pitch for more work, okay? So it's not that. But you wake up in the middle of the night, you need it here, or you just want to say, hey, think about this, you call me anytime.
Thank you, Dr. Kelly.
You're welcome. And it was a pleasure. It really was a pleasure. It really was a pleasure. You guys are great people.
Thank you.
All right, next on the agenda are consent agenda items. Are there any items on the consent agenda any members of the board would like to take out for separate consideration?
Yep, the personnel report.
Yep, number 3, personnel report.
And number 6, thought exchange engagement.
Okay. So member Herrera had number 3, personnel report, and member Whitcomb had number 6, thought exchange. Anything else? Okay. Do I have a motion and a second to approve all agenda consent items that were not requested to be pulled as presented, so excluding numbers 3 and 6?
So moved. Second.
Member Herrera made a motion, and member Mayville seconded the motion to approve all consent agenda items minus number 3 and number 6 that were pulled separately. Any discussion? At this time, I would also like to acknowledge the following donations. We had $300 from Belvedere IOU Club for Belvedere North High School Corps leaders. If we could give them a round of applause and appreciation at this time. All right, roll call, please.
Mr. Herrera.
Aye.
Ms. Mayville.
Aye.
Mr. Booker.
Aye.
Mr. Zickert.
Aye.
Mrs. Whitcomb.
Aye.
Mrs. Haut. Mrs. Brenner.
Aye. Motion passed, 7-0. Do I have a motion and a second to approve consent agenda item number 3, personnel report as presented?
So moved.
Second.
Member Mayville made a motion and Member Herrera seconded the motion to approve consent agenda items number 3, personnel report as presented. Discussion? Roll call, please.
Ms. Mayville.
Aye.
Mr. Herrera.
Abstain.
Mrs. Haut.
Aye.
Mr. Booker.
Aye.
Mr. Zickert.
Aye.
Mrs. Whitcomb.
Aye.
Mrs. Brenner.
Aye. Motion passed, 6 and 1 abstained. Do I have a motion and a second to approve consent agenda item number 6, thought exchange as presented?
So moved.
Second. Member Herrera made a motion and Member Mayville seconded the motion to approve consent agenda item number 6, thought exchange as presented. Discussion, please?
Yeah, I asked to pull it because, not that I don't know whether or not there's value in this particular version of surveying, but for me right now, any increase in expenditure when we're having to cut other things and potentially look at closing a school, for something that is important but non-essential, and it's a 32%, little over a 32% increase in the lower quote from POSIP and a almost 22% increase over the higher version of POSIP at nearly, $55,385, is not something right now that I'm prepared to vote yes for. Again, that's not the value of or the reasoning behind, has nothing to do with the value of the product, but that while it may be important, to me it's not essential when we've cut busing for tutoring and some of the other ESSER things we had to take a hard line look at, as well as being on the precipice of potentially closing the school. It would be hard for me to say, I will not be saying yes to something that would say we would prioritize data collection over every dollar that could be prioritized elsewhere to potentially make the necessary improvements for other things in the district.
I talked about this, so I don't want to repeat myself at all. That was at the Business Services Committee meeting on this versus POSIP. It was a substantial price increase. I mean, it was, but that wasn't the huge issue to me. It was part of it, but it wasn't the biggest one. Part of it was, I think if we want to do something like this, it's important that we have some indication of what specifically what we're going to use the data for and what we get out of this that we tried to get out of POSIP and couldn't get. I've never seen anything substantive from POSIP reports back that because of POSIP we did A, B, and C, and maybe we do all that stuff, we just don't know about it or hear enough about it, is that if we're gonna do something like this and spend quite a bit more money, that there's certain things we are particularly looking for and really wanted to know that information for, and we're going to utilize it before we end up doing something like this. So that's, so it's basically the same thing I said at the Business Services Committee meeting a few weeks ago, or a couple weeks ago.
When we talked about this, I was under the impression, well, two things. One, yes, it is more expensive, but I know it does a lot more. But weren't we getting rid of something else that offset the cost? I'm trying to remember what. POSIP, but something else also that made it actually not. Because we discussed the fact that parents have so many different things, right?
Oh, yes, so we talked about the fact that we are overall in our family and community partnerships, talking about how we can streamline communications, and this is a part of that. Is there something,
No,
Joanne, that
They were referring to the savings on the Skyward renewal. The $71,000
yes.
that we're saving on our annual renewal
Thank you.
was what the committee had said
That's what it
would
was.
offset
Yep.
the additional
Would
cost
offset
here.
some of the additional costs
Thank
here.
you. Which is accurate.
Yeah, and that's included in the notes. For me, that doesn't move the needle. I wanna take
Okay.
the 71,000 and I wanna take this money and say, you know, we're eliminating programs, we're talking about, you know, so for me, you know, which I appreciate you illuminating, cause it was something that was, discussed, but I say every dollar we can save is a dollar we can spend somewhere else, in student facing or staff enriching things. Not that we should cut back skyward just to save money, but we're gonna save money, so.
And just to clarify, that was a committee member who made that assumption. It was not something that I had presented as an offset to it. It was the committee that had kind of come to that, there's the
surmised
savings
that.
that you're doing that, so.
So if we don't approve this tonight, what is the effect? What is the effect on the information you can or cannot collect?
Well, we would probably go back to looking to continue with PASA. Assuming the board would approve that, we would be utilizing this data. So the nice thing about Thought Exchange that PASA doesn't provide is you're really able to gather a much deeper level of understanding of the why. So we get the PASA data and it says, I'm happy, I'm mostly happy, or I'm not happy. And then they might make a comment or two to help illuminate this. But the Thought Exchange really allows a deeper dive, and it also uses AI to create some themes for you as well. It also can be utilized in things like committee meetings, our action planning meetings, even things like our town hall that allow us to really quickly gather information from a large group that helps to give voice to people who maybe don't feel comfortable sharing in those group settings. While we are operationalizing the strategic plan, we're doing a lot of action planning. So we have a lot of teams meeting and making decisions. So not only does Thought Exchange help us with broader information from our community stakeholders, our parents, and our staff, it also, in those critical decision-making moments, allows us to hear from all the voices at the table. So if we do not do this, I think we would regroup. If the board's messaging was, we want to go with a less expensive option, I think we would probably bring back PASA. But I just think it compromises our ability to get the information that we really want to be able to have to make the decisions that I think are going to be critically important in alignment with the strategic plan.
And how much was it to renew PASA, Joanne, if you remember, just approximately?
There were
12 or
two
18,000.
different ones.
I mean, it was drastically
12,000 on the
less.
lower end, 18 on the higher end.
It's definitely less expensive.
And that's for a year.
Yes.
If we went with Thought Exchange, would we move away from our partnership that we're using for strategic plan action planning? Like, would they take the place of that, or this would be in addition to?
That contract is done, so we have completed our work with them. They have given us the access to the district scorecard tools and the processes that we are currently utilizing. So we are no longer working with them, although they're still available to us to ask them questions as needed, but we are no longer paying for that.
And what approximately, do we remember that, like, what that
Around
price?
45,000.
40,000,
Yeah.
I feel like 41, but I
Okay,
always
no, that's
hesitate
fine.
to say
No,
the
that's
number
okay. I'm
without
just
looking
trying
at it.
No, that's okay.
I do think and I do agree with on the scrutinizing of the dollars. I've said that all along, is that whenever we add something, we gotta look at what we're not doing because of that. Not only do we have necessarily to subtract, we have to look at what we're not doing. But I look at it as an analogy of like a Fitbit versus an Apple Watch. As a Fitbit gives you a lot of information, an Apple Watch gives you a heck of a lot more information. But if you're not even using or there's no real sense of what you're using on that Fitbit anyway, then getting all that great information from the Apple Watch, to me, I still need to hear what we were using PASA for and how it effectively helped us or didn't help us before we upgrade it to something that's gonna give us I agree, it's gonna give us a heck of a lot more information. I'm not negating that in the least bit. I'm just wondering what we're gonna do with that, because and I'm not saying we didn't do it, we just never saw, or it was expressed to us, all these things we did with PASA based on the feedback and information that we got, that we need the big hot, or PASA on steroids, so to speak.
So we get like the possible updates as families. I know, I mean, that's one of the pieces that happens, as well as like that information goes to parent advisory as far as some of the data and what we're doing with it. So it is being used. I am concerned just about the price differential. Like, to me, they're not even vastly in the same ballpark. So I am concerned of the number amount based on the current context, like Mrs. Whitcomb was talking about, and just in general. And just how much more money the other is for a one-year contract, or a little bit over a one-year contract, I guess, with the additional months.
Does Thought Exchange have different tiers of service, or is this kind of what you get?
They do have different tiers of service. Dr. Ady, are you able to speak to that?
They do, but they're all pretty close together, I think. I think the low end one is like 40, and then there's one 50, and then the Cadillac, so to speak, is 50 something.
Well, and the low end one wasn't gonna provide us a lot more capacity than what POSIP was going to do
Correct.
for us. And the middle one was a very small differential between that one and the version that we're recommending. And that version that we would recommend, again, really fully allows you to utilize that AI to do the data analysis and that really deep dive. And I absolutely understand the concern about the cost. And if we don't move forward with this, we will utilize some other tools. But the capacity is just entirely different. It just allows you to, you can use this in a student assembly, you can use this in a staff meeting, you can use this at cabinet. I mean, I would envision us using this frequently at our cabinet meeting to help us make decisions. Because again, you have 15 people sitting around a table, and you can make a wrong decision if you're hearing from 3 people and you got 12 people who aren't expressing their thoughts.
I think we've had an issue though, and that maybe not at those other iterations you're talking about, the cabinet level or things like that. But, you know, we have a general issue, not just us, I mean, in general, we have a difficult time getting, 10 to 12, 15% participation in a lot of these surveys. And so throwing more money at the problem right now seems like if we could solve the participation process, I don't know that we can, but if we could solve that piece, then maybe this, more data would be helpful. But to me, that's again, down the road and secondary to the.
We've had good participation rates in relation to POSIP utilization because people can answer on their phone as a text functionality. I think that helps to increase versus like long surveys. I do agree with you, like those to get the completion back, as well as the multilingual capabilities as well. But it sounds like that would be an AI as well, right?
Yep, we would be able to send it out in a link
Without
the same
exchange,
way.
excuse me.
It's a little bit different in terms of the functionality, but you would also be able to send the link out via text message. We would just have to, again, the functionality just looks a little bit different.
Dr. Shedd, what kind of reports would this create that you're not receiving today?
Again, it's really about, it creates it's really the themes and the level of information you're getting out of that AI that really distinguishes it. And there's really not a lot of players right now in the field doing this for schools right now. So I do think in a year, we would see different players in the field and perhaps be able to capture some cost savings moving forward, which is why we would really only look at 1 year. But for example, it's gonna give you essentially a Venn diagram that's gonna say, here is, one polarizing side, here is the other polarizing side, here's the common ground. Here's where you might be able to begin to solve the concern that is in front of you. It gives you also, again, the functionality is you can ask a question and people can provide their input, and then everyone has the opportunity to essentially rate that input, give it a thumbs up or a thumbs down. So whatever is really the will of the group is gonna rise to the top, and you're gonna see that theme and again, be able to make better and more informed decisions. So that is really the value of it, is you're empowering the group as opposed to empowering the loudest voice in the room.
Did you guys at Business Services see like a presentation or?
I mean, to me, Lisa's point is very important. And for the group you have in the room, I mean, it just gives you automatic anonymous feedback. But if that sample is so small, is that really helpful to pay for those extra things? That's where I struggle with, because it's a lot more money to have a couple electronic features, which maybe in a year, if there's more players in it and the cost is more effective, there might be someone else that has something better, because I kinda went back and forth, and to me, I don't know if there's that much value to pay double for something that's gonna be, like you said, a very small sample size to use. It's cool,
It's, well,
Yeah.
it is, it is cool.
is it necessary?
It is, I mean, the board's gotta make whatever decision that they feel like is the right decision at this time. And if we don't make this decision, we will, keep looking at what we can do. I will say, just the Family and Community Partnerships team was really feeling like this was gonna be a good tool to reach out to our families. But again, that doesn't mean that POSIP can't do for us what it's been doing and that we can't continue to figure out what we might look at otherwise. Joanne, were you-
And I think that one of the things that did come up at committee, and again, a decision can be made either way, is that this was demoed with two of our principals as well, who found it highly engaging and that they thought they could use it in their schools. I'm looking at Dave because I know he was sitting with the principal while they were doing the demo and seeing how it could be utilized in one of our middle schools. We had it demo with the middle school and an elementary school that had been part of it, and they could see how that could be used in their SIP teams, how it could be used with their parents, the PTOs even. I mean, the universal side of it and how it could easily integrate into those types of things were one of the components that brought us forward with this recommendation was what they were seeing at the schools. So that was a comment that was made within the committee that they had talked about. One of those principals does sit on the Business Services Committee and did talk through that a little bit at the committee level.
Yeah, and even to that point, like, it might be helpful, instead of us trying to hear from Dr. Shug, like, some more information to see that more in depth, like, and/or run it through, like, parent advisory, which would be another key player, or even, like, some of our union leads, because part of what we use POSIP for is, like, some of the employee engagement data, too, so, I don't know.
And I think your committee, for the strategic plan, the goal 3, they had kind of talked, I can't speak to that.
Yep,
'cause I wasn't
that's definitely, the Family and Community
That's kinda
Partnerships
where it
team
came from.
we did discuss it there, and we showed the functionality there, as we're, again, trying to, as I alluded to earlier, streamline the tools and the ways in which we communicate. And one of the goals of that team is to increase our family engagement, and this was a tool they thought would help us to that end.
Any further discussion? All right, roll call, please.
Mr. Herrera,
Aye.
Ms. Mayville,
Aye.
Mrs. Whitcomb,
So,
Mr. Booker,
No.
Mr. Zickert,
No.
Mrs. Haut,
Aye.
Mrs. Brenner.
No. Motion failed. 4-3. Next on our agenda are our roll call items. We first have revisions to existing Board of Education Policy 4:60, purchases and contracts. Do I have a motion and a second to approve the revisions to existing Board of Education Policy 4:60, purchases and contracts as presented?
So moved.
Second.
Member Mayville made a motion and Member Zickert seconded the motion to approve the revisions to the existing Board of Education Policy 4:60, purchases and contracts as presented. Discussion? Roll call, please.
Ms. Mayville,
Aye.
Mr. Zickert,
Aye.
Mr. Booker,
Aye.
Mrs. Whitcomb,
aye.
Mr. Herrera,
Aye.
Mrs. Haut, Mrs. Brenner.
Aye. Motion passed, 7-0. Next on the agenda is our annual Chromebook refresh. Do I have a motion and a second to approve the CDW Chromebook purchase in the amount of $471,255 as presented?
So moved.
Second.
Member Herrera made a motion and Member Mayville seconded the motion to approve the CDW Chromebook purchase in the amount of $471,255 as presented. Discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Herrera.
Aye.
Ms. Mayville.
Aye.
Mr. Booker.
Aye.
Mr. Zickert,
Aye.
Mrs. Whitcomb,
Aye.
Mrs. Haut,
Aye.
Mrs. Brenner.
Aye. Motion passed, 7-0. Next on the agenda is Washington Playground replacement. Do I have a motion and a second to approve the purchase and installation of a new playground at Washington Academy from New Toys for $200,359 as presented?
So moved.
Second.
Member Herrera made a motion and Member Mayville seconded the motion to approve the purchases and installation of a new playground at Washington Academy from New Toys for $200,359 as presented. Discussion?
Yeah, my only comment on this is that I don't wanna penalize the kids at Washington for, maybe the other playground getting disadvantaged. I mean, it's, I'm sure Washington needs the new playground or something like that, but I hope in the future we come up with a process that we've done this systematically, that we have a chart that, okay, it's, this year we're gonna do Perry, this year we're gonna do Washington, this year we're gonna do South, and so on, that we have it on like a timeline. They're looking at the needs for those schools. Maybe, I mean, hopefully we don't have to do them all at once. That really gets expensive, but so that everybody knows that, you know, by the age of these, like
Yeah.
Washington this time's gonna be at the end now.
When we adopt
Because we just spent
textbooks, right?
200 grand there, so this, they're gonna wait before they get their next refresh, so to speak. So that's my only comment.
I think you just described Mr. Winter's job. Is that fair to say? Yeah, yeah.
Any further discussion? Okay, roll call please.
Mr. Herrera.
Aye.
Ms. Mayville.
Aye.
Mrs. Haug.
Aye.
Mrs. Whitcomb.
Aye.
Mr. Booker.
Aye.
Mr. Zickert.
Aye.
Mrs. Brenner.
Aye. Motion passed 7-0. Next on the agenda, we have CTE LED light upgrade. Do I have a motion and a second to approve Gunther Electric CTE RFP response for $116,370 as presented?
So moved.
Second?
Member Herrera made a motion and Member Mayville seconded the motion to approve Gunther's Electric CTE RFP response for $116,370 as presented. Discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Herrera.
Aye.
Ms. Mayville.
Aye.
Mr. Zickert.
Aye.
Mr. Booker.
Aye.
Mrs. Whitcomb.
Aye.
Mrs. Haug. Mrs. Brenner.
Aye. Motion passed 7-0. Next on the agenda, we have the kindergarten through fifth grade ELA, English Language Arts Curriculum Review Pilot. Do I have a motion and a second to approve the K-5 ELA Curriculum Review Pilot as presented?
So moved.
Second.
Member Mayville made a motion and Member Herrera seconded the motion to approve the K-5 ELA Curriculum Review Pilot as presented. Discussion?
Yeah, I mean, I think after looking at the scores, at least I've looked at the scores quite a bit over the years, that after we do this, it would be nice to see what the quantitative result was after that, even qualitative too, both. That it would be nice to say, okay, we've learned A, B, C, and D from doing the pilot, and that's gonna cause us to wanna do whatever we do afterwards.
I would say, I was not a fan of a previous pilot program, and we didn't progress monitor it, which goes along with what Matt's saying. You have to get the information from it, or what good is the pilot, till we know what we can do going forward. And obviously, any expansion of it should go through the board,
Which previous pilot program?
the PVG pilot program.
I think this is like the language arts curriculum
But
that's
I'm
being
just-
used in the elementary schools.
I'm saying pilot programs in general.
Just in general that we're getting that data.
Yeah, I don't know what data exactly. You could be more specific about what you'd like to see once in order to approve this when it comes back.
Just to say that you know it's working.
What data would you like
Anything.
to see?
No comment.
Okay.
Improve reading scores, better fluency, things like that.
How do you subtract out all the other things that contribute to that?
I'm not sure, sorry, but finish your question.
I don't know, part of me is we could make this a long discussion, and part of me is I think I'll just quote while I'm ahead, but, I mean, getting into the educational mechanics of this probably isn't what we're really dealing with right now, but I'd be more than happy to discuss this with you anytime if you want to get into detail. I think we could tear this apart and look for things like that, and I'd be more than happy to spend whatever time you
Well,
want.
I just wanted to provide admin with some indication of what data we would want to see when this comes back to us to approve a new K-5 curriculum.
I think probably to show, based on the K-5 curriculum that we have now, that we're using, what substantive things that we think we would improve on, whether it be the test scores or whether it be formative or assessments or whatever, how we would measure that we're doing better than we were before, that we'd want to adopt this program versus what we had before. Because if we don't have anything to benchmark it against, how will we know it's any better than what we already have? I mean, you have to have some sort of distinguishing guidelines to decide a pilot one or a different one is better than the one you have, or is going to give you substantive improvement in student achievement.
So the control group would be the students that aren't piloting this program, and the data points would be the students who are piloting the program. Is that?
It's not going to be an exact science, you're right. It's not going to be an exact science like that because the kids are different. But you could do a control group and a test group if you wanted to do that. But then I think that's more than what we're proposing right here, from what I can gather.
Right, so I just wanted to know what the board wants to see when this, like qualitative data. Do you want the teachers in the pilot to come talk to us?
So I guess the substantive question to you would be then, why would we want to do, based on what you know and what you hear now, why would we want to do the pilot? What's the impetus for deciding we need to do it or want to do it?
So the K-5 curriculum has come up on our curriculum review cycle, and there is, I think we chose we've got 2 curriculums here that we're going to pilot. So I assume that at the end of the pilot program, a recommendation will come from the superintendent as to what curriculum we adopt. And I'm just asking what data the board wants to see when the superintendent brings that back, because it sounds like we want to see some data from the pilot program. And I'm just wondering if we want to see qualitative data, quantitative data. I mean, we don't really expect, how would we measure student achievement based on this pilot program?
So not seeing the information, if there's specific things administration would like to have us provide input, right now what I'm looking at is a financial schematic, right? I'm looking at numbers, right? I'm not looking at any of the details or what the promise, if you will, or attestation of the curriculums themselves are saying they would elicit as their benchmarks for why you should pick us over them. I'm not seeing any of that tonight. I'm seeing the just the numbers, and that's fine. We're being asked tonight just to determine if we want to do that. If there are specific things, in as much as we are obviously at the very infant stage of the process, that administration would like to solicit the board for input regarding, that would be helpful to know what it is they've intended or indicated are the things, why their curriculum is better than another, and then we can determine, okay, does that bear out to be true? But if there's other things, then I think we're at such an infancy stage, it'd be great to hear from administration directly, maybe in future board updates or other things to say, what information do you want, right? I don't think we know enough, maybe tonight, to know everything we want to know, except that we'd like to have there be some support that says we would move forward with something because we have a good faith reason to believe that's supported by data for why it's better than what we're doing now. That would be my position.
And I think I could give specific examples, but I think, again, I'd be accused of staff work versus board work. It's not my job to tell them what assessments to use or whatever.
So, but
At
the
all.
problem comes is when we're asked to approve the curriculum, then they hear, well, what data do you have to support that? And we haven't told them what data we want to support it. So I just want to make really clear between now and the end of the pilot program, if the board has data they want the superintendent to be collecting as this goes along, they should give that information to Dr. Shaw.
And so I think administration should be the ones to solicit that information from us.
And bring it to
specifically.
us.
If they're, right, like, that's great, I think you're right, we need to qualify what it is we're looking for, so you know whether or not you're gonna get to, the place where we can feel comfortable with it. But, I think that's something that comes from administration, not necessarily a board discussion that needs to come back to you, then it comes, tonight we're being asked to vote on whether or not we wanna proceed with the study itself, as I'm understanding it, the pilot, let's call it the pilot.
Correct.
Correct.
Can I ask a question, Dr. Shug, in relation to the pilot it looks like we're doing it for 8 weeks, correct? That's the goal?
Correct. Yes, each
So-
one will be 8 weeks long.
Okay, so when would be the hypothetical wish of the committee as far as like then bringing a resource for full adoption to the board? Kind of what does that timeline potentially look
Sure.
like?
So ideally, it would be in the first semester, half of the year. Same teachers are going to do 8, and then 8 weeks, and then they want to do the other one for 8 weeks, so that the teachers can experience both of them, so they can provide some feedback of what they're experiencing through the program. We have a February school improvement day. So ideally, if they're able to get through that and there's a comfort level there and we don't need to extend for any reason or another, we would be looking at December and January for the Ed Services Committee and then the full board, so that we are able to begin moving forward with the February SIP day so that the staff can receive the training prior to the end of the school year and the summer, because they're gonna need some more over the summer. I think the wish of the committee was that we didn't get all the way to the end of the year and say, okay, here's your books, now next August be ready to implement. So we're really targeting to have it prior to the school improvement day on February, so that could be dedicated to professional development for our teachers.
And then those teachers that are not in the pilot would just use our current resources that we have, is that correct, for the first part of the year versus the pilot resources, or?
Yes, anyone who's not in a pilot next year would look as it is this year. They would use the same resource, proficiency scales, and so forth. Just the pilot teachers would be experiencing the 2 curriculums.
And then I had asked Dr. Shug, and maybe you know Dr. Johnson, do you know as far as the resources, since in dual language they currently have, like the benchmark Adelante, if they were to go with that version, like I guess then they would have English and Spanish would be comparable. Is there a scenario where there could be 2 different resources selected and they do not have comparable resources between dual language and English?
So that is part of the reason why they're piloting, so that they can see if there is any compatibility between the other resource they're piloting and the
On the
benchmark
English,
Adelantes.
Okay.
So that is one thing that the group was highly interested in being able to see, is that even a comparable match? Because the other one is between the 2 that they're piloting.
And then, was there discussion on if they went with the other resource, would dual keep the benchmark Adelante as like a supplemental in addition to? Was that talked about?
That's part of what they're working through with the
Okay.
pilot. They actually want to experience it to see kind of what all that feels like. 'Cause so if you are going with the other one, then that's some of the discussions that they're going to have. So, but we have a robust group. They're very excited. They represent all buildings, variety of grade levels.
Any further discussion, questions? All right, roll call please.
Ms. Mayville.
Aye.
Mr. Herrera.
Aye.
Mrs. Whitcomb.
Aye.
Mr. Zickert.
Aye.
Mr. Booker.
Aye.
Mrs. Hope.
Aye.
Mrs. Brunner.
Aye, motion passed 7-0. Next on the agenda, we have kindergarten research team professional development contract. Do I have a motion and a second to approve the contract for professional development for our kindergarten teachers, supporting staff, and other primary age teachers as presented?
So moved.
Second.
Member Mayville made a motion and Member Herrera seconded the motion to approve the contract for professional development for kindergarten teachers, supporting staff, and other primary age teachers as presented. Discussion?
This came to curriculum committee. Mr. Smith from Meehan, the principal at Meehan School, presented on this. I think he was kind of the lead on the team that came up with this proposal. This kind of stemmed out of some of the severe behavior problems that we've seen this year and prior years in kindergarten. And it really is very cool. It provides some professional development that was really well thought of by teachers who are in the room. It also provides push and coaching after that professional development, so the teachers will have someone in the room with them, helping them to actually implement the PD. It the presentation they gave, that Mr. Smith gave at curriculum committee showed how much time and effort went into this proposal. And I think it's something that the staff is really excited about.
Any further discussion?
Do they have, and I didn't see the presentation, but I mean, I think it's a real positive thing to do. Are there supports built in there to when the teachers, I mean, every new program is good until it goes bad, until people struggle with it and then they don't know what to do and they get frustrated. And maybe, is there supports along the way they're gonna be providing this program for people that when they get an obstacle, there's somebody to go out to or reach out to say, okay, I really tried hard, but this happened, and this happened, what do I do? And how would I fix it?
There's specific coaching for the
And that was the
individual
coaching
kindergarten
component
teachers.
that the committee really appreciated, was that the support was embedded and all through the year.
So that is definitely, I think, the best part of the professional development is really providing each one of those teachers with individualized support.
I'm really pleased to see this. I feel like we've had a lot of discussions at the board table in relation to some of our discipline concerns, some of our disconnect between a 2.5-hour day to a full day. So I think as much as we can do to continue to bridge that gap, and to me, this is a similar function that, you know, can help support some of the behavior needs, I think is a positive.
And there are a lot of, if you look at the, we're approving the cost of the PD on this, but if you look at the action plan that the kindergarten team came up with for the upcoming school year, it is really detailed and specific, and they have lots of strategies to try to make it an easier transition for some of our more challenging kids who are coming into kindergarten. So if you haven't had a chance to look at it, take a look, because that committee, I mean, they did a ton of work on this, and I think they've got some really good ideas.
Great. Any further discussion? Okay. Roll call, please.
Ms. Mayville?
Aye.
Mr. Herrera?
Aye.
Mrs. Hauk?
Aye.
Mr. Bucher?
Aye.
Mr. Zicker?
Aye.
Mrs. Whitcomb?
Aye.
And Mrs. Brenner?
Aye. Motion passed 7-0. Next on the agenda is possible action to approve 2024-25 administrative contract for 12-month technology director. Do I have a motion and a second to approve the 2024-25 administrative contract for Tyler Bell, 12-month technology director for District 100, effective July 1st, 2024?
So moved.
Second.
Member Herrera made a motion, and Member Hauk seconded the motion to approve the 2024-25 administrative contract for Tyler Bell, 12-month technology director for District 100, effective July 1, 2024. Discussion?
Yeah, I'll just say really quick, and I'm not gonna repeat it for everyone, so we can just get it over with now, is that I've been a big proponent of having some sort of performance component in all these contracts for the last 3 years. First year after when we voted on them, when I was on the board, I said I would never vote for another one again without a performance component in there, and last year I did anyway. I did for a lot of reasons. I thought a lot about it again this time. I think we have a lot of wonderful administrators in the district, far more than a lot of other districts do. And I work in other districts, and I think our administrators are really, a lot of them are exceptional. And a lot of them are good. Some exceptional, some good, and some are pretty good too. But I do think we ought to have a base of what we give everybody, so I don't think we should not give anybody anything for the most part. But I also think there ought to be rewards for people that do exceptional work and incentives to do that. So that's why I'm voting no. It's got nothing to do with what I think the quality of the administrators are, because I think a lot of them deserve more than they're gonna get.
I'll piggyback on that, which I've said it before. I think, you know, this particular one, you may deserve more than what he's getting, and someone else might deserve less. And I just don't like that message that everybody gets the same, depending on the job that they're doing. I don't think it sends a good message to anybody. But, so I have voted no before, I'm gonna vote no as well, as we go down. And that is why, not because of the money, because there should be a performance or evaluation component to this on performance that is there, and there's not.
I have to abstain from this vote because this is one of my family members, so I just want to share that with the board in relation to these discussions as we move forward on this potential agenda item. Any further discussion?
No, the superintendent has the ability based on board policy to identify adjustment to salaries based on performance. I think that's happened almost every year that I've been on the board. So I'm fine with this. It's not the board's job to set individual salaries, so.
That was never my intent to send board individual salaries when I spoke of this. Alls I said was, this is superintendent, in my opinion, it's her ability to decide this person deserves a little bigger raise than that person. I'm not saying who it is, how much, or whatever, but in this case, we did give everybody the same except for a couple few instances where we thought we were under market or thought people didn't start out what they should have kind of thing. And we raised them up one considerably that I didn't argue at all about or say anything about it. But I mean, I don't think anybody's saying, going through the list and saying Johnny should get this, Susie should get that, and Sally ought to get this. I just think there ought to be some sort of component that, based on data or based on the evaluation that these guys got, that some of the, and I've done these evaluations, I've done a lot of them, that there are some people that score higher than others that showed they're exceptional at what they do, at least in that time frame. Either that or we shouldn't do the evaluations anymore. We ought to just have pass-fail evaluations, in which we don't have those.
Right.
So,
I do appreciate that feedback, and we will continue to discuss that. I would just say with some level of urgency that our technology director is incredibly important, and I hope that we will have 4 votes for his contract this evening.
I agree.
Okay.
Okay. Any further discussion? Okay, roll call, please.
Mr. Herrera?
Aye.
Mrs. Hope?
Aye.
Mr. Booker?
Aye.
Mrs. Whitcomb?
Aye.
Ms. Mayville?
Aye.
Mr. Zicker?
no.
Mrs. Brenner?
Abstained. Okay, motion passed. 5-1 and 1 abstained. Next on the agenda, we have possible action items to approve the 2024-25 administrative contract for 9-month administrators. Do I have a motion and a second to approve the 2024-25 administrative contracts for the following 9-month administrators effective July 1st, 2024, Joseph Hansen, Michael Patterson, Scott Ramsby, and Brian Young?
So moved.
Member Herrera made a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
And Member Hauk seconded the motion to approve the 2024-25 administrative contracts for the 9-month administrators listed above effective July 1st, 2024. Discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Herrera?
Aye.
Mrs. Hope?
Aye.
Mr. Zicker?
No.
Ms. Mayville?
Aye.
Mr. Booker?
Aye.
Mrs. Whitcomb?
Aye.
Mrs. Brenner?
Aye. Motion passed 6-1. The next is possible action to approve the 2024-25 administrative contract for 10-month administrators. Do I have a motion and a second to approve the 2024-25 administrative contracts for the following 10-month administrators effective July 1st, 2024? Kelly Cotter, Catherine Hornbeck, Teresa Lazdowski, Beth Markini, Heather Nelson, Sean Newmas, Heather Novak, Leslie Pascola, Tasha Reyes, Steve Repka, Elizabeth Sherman, Donald Smith, Chris Woloka, Andrew Werhane, and Shannon Wierzinski.
So moved.
Second.
Member Herrera made a motion and Member Hauk seconded the motion to approve the 2024-25 administrative contracts for the following 10-month administrators effective July 1st, 2024. Discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Herrera?
Aye.
Mrs. Hope?
Aye.
Ms. Mayville?
Aye.
Mr. Booker?
Aye.
Mr. Zicker?
No.
Mrs. Whitcomb?
Aye.
Mrs. Brenner?
Aye. Motion passed 6-1. Next, possible action to approve the 2024-25 administrative contract for 11-month administrators. Do I have a motion and a second to approve the 2024-25 administrative contracts for the following 11-month administrators effective July 1st, 2024. Joy Bauman, Ben Comer, Michelle Eklund, Jody Flynn, Casey Getty, John Risotto, and Josh Sternquist.
So moved.
Member Herrera made a motion and Member Hauk seconded the motion to approve the 2024-25 administrative contracts for the following 11-month administrators effective July 1, 2024, the administrators named above. Discussion?
Yeah, so there's a single contract within this scope that I will be voting no for. So I'm gonna be honest, I'm not entirely sure whether it makes more sense to pull it out and amend the amendment. I think I can say what I need to say without putting us through all that, if that's okay. So that's the direction I'm gonna choose to go, unless the thought is maybe it's better not to do it that way and pull it out specifically. Because obviously what I would need to do would be vote no for all of them, because I would be choosing to vote no for one of them. Or I can amend the amendment, and I'll be honest, that's a clumsy process for me, I'm sure exactly why I want to do it. So I'm gonna go this route, I'm gonna say this. I think that Jody Flynn has done amazing things for the district, and I'm not debating it or, in any way indicating that's not true. But I believe that an accommodation has been made to allow for a pretty significant amendment in his retirement date that the board chose to accommodate at last month's board meeting. I voted no to the personnel report to make that amendment. And I do think it was an accommodation we didn't have to make, but we chose to, and I respect the fact that that's now the voice of the board. But for me, knowing he'll only be here 3 additional months and seeing a 6% increase, that would have been annualized, and I would have lived with it because I have chosen to live with the 6s based on the fact that the board as a whole made the decision to extend those. But because I voted no for the extension or the acceleration of his retirement, I will be voting no for this tier of people based on the fact that not for any other reason, that I'm not in line with a 6% increase, given that I didn't vote yes for his accelerated retirement.
So are you good with me not amending?
I am.
Is that
Yeah.
fine? You said your reason, thank you.
Yes.
Okay. Any further discussion? All right, roll call please.
Mr. Herrera.
Aye.
Mrs. Hope.
Aye.
Mrs. Whitcomb.
No.
Ms. Mayville.
No.
Mr. Booker.
Aye.
Mr. Zickert.
No.
And Mrs. Brenner.
Aye. Motion passed 4-3. Possible action to approve 2024-25 administrative contract for 12-month principal administrators. Do I have a motion and a second to approve the 2024-25 administrative contracts for the following 11-month principal administrators effective July 1st, 2024, Billy Lewis and James Friesma?
So moved.
I think they were 12 month, just,
What did I say?
you
I'm
said a
sorry.
lot. But it's
Did I
okay.
say it
I
wrong
just didn't want
twice?
to, I just didn't want to
Did
go
I
in the
say it
minutes
wrong
wrong.
twice, both times?
I just didn't want to get in
Okay.
the minutes wrong.
Okay, sorry. Possible action to approve the 2024-25 administrative contract for a 12-month principal administrators. Thank you, Matt. Do I have a motion and a second to approve the 2024-25 administrative contracts for the following 12-month principal administrators effective July 1st, 2024? Billy Lewis and James Friesma.
So moved.
Second.
Member Herrera made a motion and Member Mayville seconded the motion to approve the 2024-25 administrative contracts for the 2 listed above 12-month principal administrators effective July 1st, 2024. Discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Herrera.
Aye.
Ms. Mayville.
Aye.
Mr. Booker.
Aye.
Mrs. Whitcomb.
Aye.
Mrs. Hope. Mr. Zickert.
No.
Mrs. Brenner.
Aye. Motion passed 6-1. Possible action to approve the 2024-25 administrative contract for 12-month administrators. Do I have a motion and a second to approve the 2024-25 administrative contracts for the following 12-month administrators effective July 1st, 2024? William Ady, David Carson, Matt Fry, Megan Johnson, Michael Escola, Frank Mandera, Renee Mandujano, Kim Ramsby, Barb Valant, and Megan Zanaco.
So moved.
Second.
Member Herrera made a motion and Member Mayville seconded the motion to approve the 2024-25 administrative contracts for the following 12-month administrators effective July 1st, 2024. Discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Herrera.
Aye.
Ms. Mayville.
Aye.
Mr. Booker.
Aye.
Mrs. Haut. Mr. Zickert.
No.
Mrs. Whitcomb.
Aye.
Mrs. Brenner.
Aye. Motion passed 6-1. Possible action to approve the 2024-25 administrative contract for 12-month IMRF administrator. Do I have a motion and a second to approve the 2024-25 administrative contract for Joanne Armstrong, 12-month IMRF administrator effective July 1st, 2024?
So moved.
Second.
Member Herrera made a motion and Member Mayville seconded the motion to approve the 2024-25 administrative contract for Joanne Armstrong, 12-month IMRF administrator effective July 1, 2024. Discussion? Roll call.
Mr. Herrera.
Aye.
Ms. Mayville.
Aye.
Mr. Booker.
Aye.
Mrs. Whitcomb.
Aye.
Mrs. Haut.
Aye.
Mr. Zickert. Mrs. Brenner.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you because I
No,
was
I'm
coughing.
sorry.
Sorry.
My fault.
That's okay.
My fault.
Aye. Okay, motion passed 6-1. Possible action to approve the 2024-25 administrative contract for 12-month IMRF director. Do I have a motion and a second to approve the 2024-25 administrative contract for Sean Winters, 12-month IMRF director effective July 1st, 2024?
So moved.
Second.
Member Mayville made a motion and Member Herrera seconded the motion to approve the 2024-25 administrative contract for Sean Winters, 12-month IMRF director effective July 1st, 2024. Discussion? Roll call, please.
Ms. Mayville.
Aye.
Mr. Herrera.
Aye.
Mr. Booker.
Aye.
Mrs. Haut. Mr. Zickert.
No.
Mrs. Whitcomb.
Aye.
Mrs. Brenner.
Aye. Motion passed 6-1. Next on the agenda, possible action to approve the 2024-25 non-union employee group wage increase. Do I have a motion and a second to approve the 2024-25 non-union employee group wage increase effective July 1st, 2024?
Second.
Member Hauk made a motion and Member Herrera seconded the motion to approve the 2024-25 non-union employee group wage increase effective July 1st, 2024. Discussion?
Yeah, I'm gonna vote yes, so I'm not gonna, nothing to that effect, but I am gonna just say, as we're finishing up this whole section of items, that I will echo what Mr. Zickert said and would join him in voting no next year if there's not some additional way in which excellence is called out or concerns are, I mean, I don't think we have any concerns or we'd know about those, but so that there would be some intentionality made to at least beginning baby steps of finding a way to at least, if not make raises entirely dependent on performance, at least give some indication that some genuine study has been given to why that isn't something administration feels that they should do going forward. So this is just the end of these, so I'm just gonna make that point here.
And I voted yes for them, but I didn't like it, but I don't wanna penalize some either who deserve it. And I mean, clearly the votes were there, but I just wanna emphasize there should be some type of performance in your evaluation. I don't understand that.
Any further discussion? I would like to just give a celebration to this group of employees. I think they do a lot of work that supports our district, and I really think that a lot of their work sometimes is behind the scenes and goes unseen, so I just want to applaud them for the efforts and their contributions to our district. All right, any further discussion? Roll call.
Mrs. Haut. Mr. Herrera.
Aye.
Ms. Mayville.
Aye.
Mr. Booker.
Aye.
Mr. Zickert.
Aye.
Mrs. Whitcomb.
Aye.
And Mrs. Brenner.
Aye, motion passed 7-0. Next on the agenda, we have job description for Assistant Superintendent for Special Education. Do I have a motion and a second to approve the job description for Assistant Superintendent for Special Education as presented?
So moved.
Second.
Member Herrera made a motion and Member Mayville seconded the motion to approve the job descriptions for Assistant Superintendent for Special Education as presented. Discussion?
Yeah,
So,
one, one of the problems I had with this was the rationale for it. It's not necessarily the position, it's the rationale for it. I mean, I think it was the study, the rationale was the study indicated it needed to be, it needed to be a superintendent level position instead of a director one to aid accountability among other things. So to me, that implied that as a director, it had to be a step over the principles. I think that was the impetus of it. So that to me implied that part of the problem is we saw the special education study, and some of the good and the bad about it, and there's a lot of both, is that there was an attempt, the principals were an obstacle to having this go like it should, so they needed somebody higher up than them to tell them you have to do it or else kind of thing. And I don't think that's the case. I mean, I really don't believe that's the case by any stretch of the imagination. So I'm just, to me, whether we call it a director, whether we call it assistant superintendent, it's what the person actually does. And I don't think the principals, quite candidly, would look at it any different. And I know a lot of them, but I don't think even if I didn't know them, they wouldn't look at it any differently. If an assistant superintendent's telling them to do something, or director's telling them to do something, especially somebody as specific as a special ed thing, where that's an expert in theory versus people as a principal who know stuff about special ed, but they really don't want to venture out into the expertise area too far sometimes, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, I think like, yes, I agree with the expertise area, that they definitely have different training and background. I guess I would say if someone was my colleague, what they're saying, not that I'm going to ignore them, but we're in a different place together versus my direct supervisor who's giving me a directive on what I need to be adhering to. I do think that can be a different dialogue based on positional authority.
I just look at it as, let's just say my theory was true. I don't think it is, but I mean, just going out as hypothetical, that really was one of our problems that we needed to fix. That I would also argue that if that person in charge got rebuffed on some of those things that they were supposed to do because they thought they were at equal level as the principals, that person should have told their supervisors or their people next up the ladder. And then if we did nothing, we'd even have a larger problem. So I guess I just didn't understand the logic of all that, is that if all this stuff is, I don't think it ever happened, but I mean, that's why I just don't see the need for it other than and I also say if we put them at an assistant superintendent level, we pay them significantly less than the ones we already have that's sending an interesting message too.
Depending on, their experience level, right, where they come from, like they might be from a smaller district or that might be their first district office position. It depends on the candidate, obviously.
Dr. Shug, can you give us some input onto the pros and cons if we decide to do this?
Well, sure, absolutely. So first of all, it was very clearly a recommendation in the study. And one of the recommendations I had was to address this leadership structure first. So when they're talking about getting started, this is a place they wanted to get started. Because Teresa has accepted a position in another district, we have to sort of turn this decision around fairly quickly. And so we wanted to capitalize on this opportunity. We think, we are hopeful that we will get a really high quality candidate by making the position hopefully more appealing in that regard. We can talk a little bit more about the salary, but Mrs. Brenner is certainly correct. Our existing position has been filled for a number of years, so that existing salary at what it would have been is still a considerable salary and appropriately comped, but we might need to move above that depending on who applies and what seems to be an appropriate spot, and certainly that's all going to come through the board at the end of the day, but I believe we can get a really high quality candidate in this position. I do think that one of the concerns we have had is the org chart, and that we don't have sort of that student services area on that org chart that would be very appropriate in a district of this size. So somebody to oversee that. I believe if we hire a really high quality assistant superintendent for this role, they will have the capacity to take what was done in that study and really implement and make good work of that. So I think you get a higher quality candidate to better organize my thinking. I think it does create a higher level of accountability And I think and it was a key recommendation in terms of the leadership structure coming out of the report. I think those are three really strong reasons to looking at doing this.
Is there any downside in your opinion?
What is a downside? It could be a more significant investment than the current position. And there's gonna be other things that we're gonna need to implement as a result of this study. So there might be other costs, well, I anticipate there will be other costs that we're gonna incur as a result of this. I also believe that there's gonna be other costs that we will incur in our bilingual programming as a result of this. I think some of the needs that we are seeing in special education are needs that we will see in bilingual. So I think there's gonna be some spend that we need to do to be really executing both sides of those programs in the best possible way, which is critical to closing those achievement gaps. So is that a disadvantage? I mean, we're looking at spending money in a lot of different capacities right now, and that's a challenge that we need to face. But I think academic achievement and growth and learning environment have definitely been critical targets in the strategic plan that need to be addressed.
I wouldn't argue any of those for a second. I think that's all very appropriate. I think that we did, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think there was at one time, Dr. Johnson was in charge of student services as an assistant superintendent. So we have had that model before. So it's not foreign to the district. The other part of it is, if you look at the recommendation of the company we hired, one of the other ones is gonna be an assistant to that assistant who's gonna be in charge of the directors, or not directors, but the leaders that we already have, like secondary and elementary for spec ed. So we'd have another person in there. And like I said before, if you look at the salary we're paying that, and I'm just being realistic about it, is her salary is equivalent to less or a little less, or around the same as, depending on which one you pick, what the high school principals are making, in most cases probably less now. So we're gonna hire assistant superintendent at the proposed one we're looking at, less than what we're paying the two high school principals, probably, at least one for sure, the other one probably two. And then we're gonna hire another probably six-figure plus position underneath that person to take care of the elementary and the high school, or the elementary and the high school and middle school. And I'm not saying those aren't all needed. I'm not arguing based on that report I read, because some of it was pretty damning, and some of it was pretty good. And I think there's a little of both. But I also think that we do that at the expense of what? And we just had somebody decide to leave us a week or two ago, and now all of a sudden we're moving to this. And that's a ripple effect, just like a lot of other things, that we're really jumping big right off the bat without knowing. I mean, we were all right with what we had until 2 weeks ago, from what I know. So now all of a sudden we have to change a lot. And I'm not saying that report doesn't validate a lot of that, but at the time, I'll let it go at that.
I think, like, as he talked tonight, this is gonna be a multi-year process. To me, this is one piece in the moving forward of this work. And we could get further and say we don't like adding the other positions, and then we decide not to if we get to that place. Or does this role meld into some hybrid of, special populations oversight, maybe, that matches our org chart more effectively? I just think, to me, at the timing, based on someone's recent resignation, if we're gonna do it now, makes sense versus having a director position that then morphs into something else, because you're gonna get a different pool of candidates based on how we advertise it.
Yeah, and I don't disagree, and so I guess my only point here would be, I do think it is in line with the recommendations. I would also echo what Mr. Zickert said, if, and it's an if we have in any program anywhere in the district, we've comprehensively studied this particular program now, if we have any indication or become aware that there are situations where individuals who are not titled in a way that people find to make them, supervisory or, maybe directive in the information they would share, and we're seeing breakdown because of that, we probably have to ferret that out other places as well, if that's an indication here. But for me, we're talking about the fact that this, and this is not something I haven't already shared, I have. This is something we want to call out as an assistant superintendent for special education, and yet we make as point 3 in the job description, superintendent endorsement preferred. To me, it should be a requirement of the position. If we're gonna call this an assistant superintendency, we're gonna expect that they come in and potentially have a significantly larger footprint potentially over the next 2 to 3 to 5, who knows how many years, with a change significantly in the type of programming and or the staffing of the leadership. You know, we don't bring someone in and call them an assistant superintendent if they're not prepared with the credentials to serve as an assistant superintendent when they hit the ground.
We just talked about it policy. I did bring up your point after you brought that forward, that it may limit who we get as candidates in the beginning, and we did talk about that, like, a lot of our people in current assistant superintendent roles may not have had that when they started in the role, but that, you know, within your, you know, whether it's the interview process and Dr. Ady talking with them, that it would be our expectation that you would finish that or get that endorsement. If you don't have it, could be a part of that dialogue and conversation, just so we're not limiting by only having people that have it.
I think we limit by the salary. I mean, I think if you really want an assistant superintendent, it's a tough place to hire people. I mean, it's not, we have a hard enough time finding teachers that, if that's really your goal, to get the top-notch person there possibly is, in my opinion, the salary is gonna will limit you a heck of a lot more than the title is. And then I'd rather have us be honest and upfront and say, this is what we want because we saw this report and we've reflected on it and we've done this stuff, and say, this is a salary we think we need to do to attract this candidate that's gonna turn that program around, then come back to us a month later or 2 months later and say, yeah, we advertised it at 130, but we're gonna pay them 170. Because,
Yeah, I do agree with
I
that.
mean, I
do agree
think
with
that's
that will feel-
disingenuous all over the place.
And I'm not speculating that that would be the intent, but I would think you would probably be able to see if the role was reversed. It might feel a little bait and switch, like, wait, 130 to 1, and we might have to pay higher, I'm not saying, but just, and then I'll be done. From a credentialed perspective, we have hired people without credential, before my time, not, since I have been here on the board, you know, but that typically comes at a level of indebtedness as well. If we move people through and they come without a certain credential, then there's, you know, there's been a lot of consideration and a lot of expense given to helping people to get those advanced credentials and degrees. And so, you know, I think if we're gonna really pay the right amount, whatever that comes out to be, and I think it's probably sooner rather than later, if you need to speculate it's higher, would be great to know. But I just feel like they need to come credentialed and not come without the superintendent.
I appreciate that, and I appreciate the support for potentially a higher salary. We are certainly happy to post it at a higher rate. I do think you are absolutely right, that we are more likely to get somebody with the qualifications that we're seeking at a higher rate. So, and I certainly don't want to be disingenuous whatsoever. So we will definitely look at posting that at a higher rate. Thank you.
I want to be clear, I'm going to vote no on the job description based upon the fact that we're not indicating that it is a requirement that they have the superintendent endorsement.
Any further discussion?
No, I'm good. I'm gonna vote yes. So,
I'll vote yes, but I will vote no if we get somebody with that much higher a rate and they don't have that certification.
And I think this will help with like what we've talked a lot about with policy, right? As we start using those executive templates, here's a range and here's our rationale, right? By why we're bringing this person forward at whatever category, right? Or offering based on their
Big difference maker for me on that, I agree.
All right, roll call please.
Mr. Herrera.
aye.
Ms. Maybell.
Aye.
Mrs. Hauk. Mr. Bucher.
Aye.
Mr. Zickert.
Aye.
Mrs. Whitcomb.
No,
Mrs. Brenner.
Aye. Motion passed, 6-1. The following items have been added for discussion or will be coming up for further review and or possible action in the future. Background information has been provided and the board may ask questions and or request clarification at this time. Anything in relation to upcoming contract renewals and reports? The next part, we can do the presentation first before.
I think that makes sense. We have from Stiefel this evening. Do you want to?
Yeah, Then, sorry, I was getting clarification from Dr. Shucks, we're on the same page. For facilities master plan, at this time, we would have a presentation that's gonna be shared and an update with the board, before we have full dialogue in relation to what we saw in the public hearing and or other additional information we might need from Dr. Shug. Welcome.
Good evening. My
Hi.
name's Ann Noble, I'm with Stifel. I think you all have a copy of my presentation in front of you, that Joanne was nice enough to copy. My goal tonight was just to share with you, your financial options available to you as you consider your master facility plan. You clearly have some challenging decisions ahead of you, and I do not envy you that, but I wanted to share with you where you stand on some of your options and what it means as you evaluate how you address the needs across the district with regard to your facilities. So if you turn to page 4 and 5, I will try to be brief on all of this. I know you've all been slowing down. The district currently has 5 sets of outstanding bonds. They total about $64 million between the 5 sets of bonds. Oops, all right, microphone.
It goes right to our live stream.
All right. All righty, is that better? There we go. Okay, so the district currently has 5 sets of bonds outstanding, ranging over different periods of time. Most of which have been refinanced over the past several years to take advantage of lower interest rates and to produce a smooth bond repayment schedule for the district's taxpayers. So you can see the 5 sets of bonds there. There are a couple of additional refinancing opportunities coming up in 2026 and 2027 that we will keep you apprised of as we get closer to those and whether they produce savings at those times. Right now, they probably would not, given where current interest rates are. Do you have any questions about the outstanding bonds? Okay. On page 6, I highlighted the statutory calculation for the district's debt limit. Again, I won't walk you through all the minutia of this. But the state essentially says you can have bonds outstanding equal to up to 13.8% of the district's equalized assessed valuation. And from that, we deduct outstanding bonds, which results in a borrowing capacity of about $81.5 million that you could borrow without going to the General Assembly and asking for special favors, which districts do regularly when they have massive building needs. But you have $81.5 million of borrowing capacity without doing that. And I will, as just a sub-bullet point there, anything you borrowed using the county-wide sales tax that you have does not count toward this $81 million. The $81 million only applies to bonds that are secured by the property tax levy. The next page, page 7, is perhaps the most important page in here. This just highlights the district's 5 sets of outstanding bonds. You can see we have the tax base over on the left of a little over $1 billion. We're not assuming any future growth in that tax base. Then we show you the 5 sets of outstanding bonds, and there's a column not all the way over to the right, but 2/3 of the way over, labeled B&I debt service. That stands for bond and interest debt service, which is the principal and interest payments on the outstanding $64 million worth of bonds. And you can see that payment is pretty flat at about $11.5 million a year, which is what those refinancings were used to do, was to flatline that out because you did have some pretty excessive increases annually in those bond payments originally. So we did flatten those out to keep the tax rate flat. You'll see the last couple of years it does pop up a little bit to about $12.1 million. We're expecting that between now and then we'll probably do another refinancing and flatten those out for you, okay? So the tax rate without any abatement, without using your sales tax revenue, if you were levying for the full $11.5 million, the tax rate on the district's bonds would be about $1.10 of the district's overall tax rate. That doesn't count what you're levying for your operations, which is obviously the majority of the district's tax rate. But just the bond tax rate would be about $1.10. The district has religiously used the sales tax revenue that was passed oh so many years ago. I should have looked that up. Does anybody know the year? I should have looked it up. My apologies.
It was like 13 or 14.
Yeah, I'm going with 8 years ago, but it could be 10. The district has religiously used that countywide sales tax revenue to abate, which basically means pay part of your bond payment. So this current fiscal year that you're sitting in, that was worth $3,450,000. $3,450,000 that the district abated or basically removed from the property tax rolls using your sales tax revenue. So that $11.5 million bond payment becomes about $8 million. Okay, so that's what you levied. You levied the $8 million. So the $1.10 that I talked about became 75 cents. Okay, so that's the direct deduct off your property tax bills. What's that worth to a homeowner? Well, it totally depends on the value of their home. But I used just a $100,000 market value home because you can sort of prorate it up. If your house is worth $200,000, it's not a straight line math because this includes a homestead exemption and you only get one homestead exemption. So it isn't straight line math, but it's pretty close. For a $100,000 home, that property tax reduction, which is about 35 cents, is worth about $109 a year off that taxpayer's bill. Any questions on that? All right. This little table down in the bottom right that says D-sub history, this is getting a little bit in the weeds. You're a property tax capped district, and the tax caps relate to your operating levy primarily, but there is also a cap on the amount the district can pay in a bond payment that wasn't approved by the taxpayers. And that amount is called your debt service extension base. And non-voter approved bonds are typically sold for a type of bond that we call health, life, safety bonds, which are exactly that. They're issued for needs that are mandated by the state in your 10-year health, life, safety survey. You can use it for other types of projects. That's the most common use. So the district's debt service extension base, down at the very bottom number, bottom right there, is $2,414,000. It grows every year by CPI now, didn't used to. Okay? You're not using any of that right now because the bonds that you have outstanding were all voter approved. Okay? So I will show you, I will quantify for you as one of the tools in your tool belt, you have that available to you. Okay? And I'll show you what that means. So that's on the next page, page 8. So as you think about your facility needs, there are multiple different ways you can consider funding those needs. One of the ways is to sell bonds with your debt service extension base. These are not voter approved bonds. They do typically go through a public hearing and sometimes a backdoor referendum process where the voters have 30 days to review a petition and submit it if they don't wish you to move forward without voter approval. Okay? If you chose to move forward with this type of bond, I just did math for you based on 10, 15, and 20-year borrowings at that $2.4 million annual payment, and I ran it at different interest rates, and that's all at the bottom of the page there. So for a 10-year borrowing, it funds about $19 million worth of projects. For a 15-year borrowing, it funds about $25 million worth of projects, and so on. But the key thing to note is the far right-hand side, this is not free because you're not levying that $2.4 million in your tax bills currently. That would cause about a 23-cent tax increase, okay? If you borrowed the full amount. You obviously don't have to borrow the full amount. You could use $1 million of your debt service extension base. There are 100 different ways the options I'm showing you tonight could be run. I've just picked a few to give you a sense, okay? But it's pretty pro rata. If you said I was going to use half of it, it'll fund about half of what's shown on the page, okay? And the tax impact to a $100,000 home of that 23 cents is about $63 annually, okay? The next page, page 9, takes your sales tax revenue and it says, what if you use that for school facility improvements instead of property tax abatement? There are two legal uses for sales tax revenue. You're using it for one of them. The other one is for school facility improvements. You cannot use it for salaries. You cannot use it to buy school buses, but you can use it to improve your facilities, okay? So if you stopped abating and you used it to fund a borrowing that would allow you to do school facility improvements, what's that worth to you? I assumed that we would use 80% of that revenue annually. That's a statutory sort of threshold, so I picked that number, which is about $3.25 million. And then I did the same thing, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years. That funds between $25 and $40 million, depending on the payback period you're talking about. But that means you're not abating anymore. Okay, so that 35 cents that we talked about 2 pages ago will go back on the tax rolls. This itself doesn't cost the taxpayers anything directly because you're using your sales tax revenue to pay back these bonds and you already have that money coming in. But you wouldn't be abating that $3.5 million anymore, so that would cause a tax increase. Does that make sense? Okay. And then the last scenario I ran was just, what if you use district cash? No impact to the taxpayer. If you took $2 million, my number, I made it up. Nobody told me you have $2 million to spend on this, okay? If you took $2 million of annual operating funds and you used it to secure a borrowing to put toward your facilities, what would that support in facility improvements? And again, 10, 15, 20 years. That supports between $15 and $25 million worth of payments, but you got to find $2 million worth in your budget to make that bond payment every year. Okay. The last option available to you are what you've done in the past. The bonds you currently have were voter approved. You can go to the voters and say, this is the plan we think we would like to recommend to the community. It's going to cost blank $1 million, which is going to have blank impact on the property tax rolls, and we ask you to weigh in on that. And on page 11, I highlighted for you the election dates available to us. We have very limited elections in Illinois. Very few opportunities for voters to weigh in. So we have the upcoming presidential election, then the April election for school board, April of 25, then the gubernatorial primary in March of 26, and the gubernatorial election in November of 26, and then it all starts back over again. Okay, so those are your election cycles, and I could give you the deadlines on when you have to approve things and when you have to file things, but this just gives you a general outline of what you're looking at if you're thinking about putting something on the ballot. And then you could combine any of these things. You could say, I want to do a 3-year borrowing with sales tax money, and we're going to work up to putting something on the ballot in 2026. We're going to do a 5-year health life safety bond, and we're going to wait until our bonds go away, because your bonds are actually going away. They are not here too much longer. So that revenue will free up in fiscal year 30. That feels very far away, but it will be here before we know it, okay? So you could consider, what could we do between now and fiscal 30? And then once you get there, you have the sales tax free and clear, okay? So 100 ways you could slice this, and I would be happy to run any analysis you would like to see, but I just wanted you to have a general sense of the options on the table as you try to weigh all the different needs that I know you're trying to address. So anything else I can answer?
No, I mean, I think when you look at it, I mean, even the sales tax was done and it was promised to rebate the property taxes back then, back in the day. But I also think people need to realize, the idea was people out in the Oasis were gonna throw in a lot of money, and people that came to Boone County Fair were gonna throw in a lot of money, which probably does happen. But a lot of that $3 million is our money going in there.
Sure.
I mean, we're getting back money that we put in there at $100 or, depending on how big a home you own.
Right.
Or $109 a person or whatever. So it's a rebate of part of somebody else's money, but a lot of ours too. That is ours.
Absolutely.
It'd be interesting to see what the rates, because people's property tax bills are gonna be coming out real quick, is that when those bonds disappear, what the property taxes would be when they disappear if we didn't issue more bonds or borrow more or whatever, because we borrow again, if you borrow 20 years out, you're not borrowing for your kids, you're borrowing for the past year kids, maybe your grandkids then.
Oh, I understand. Yeah, it's 75 cents it'll go away in 6 more years, so.
That's on the tax rate.
Correct.
So that's a lot, that depending on how expensive a house you have, that's real money.
75.
So that's the 109 annual?
No, the
or
100,
that's
so the 75 cents is the far right-hand column on page 7, which is the rate after you abate.
Right, so on a $100,000.
On a $100,000 home, what is that worth? That's going to be 2 1/4.
Okay.
So for somebody to own a $300,000 house, you're looking about $400, roughly.
A $300,000 house will
Yeah.
be more than that.
Yeah,
It'll
more than
be
that. Yeah, you're right.
more like 600
Yeah, more like
probably.
600,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, you're right, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit more about the operating funds, borrowing capacity. I don't know if you can dumb this down enough for me, but can you explain that again?
Yeah, districts can basically borrow through what is essentially a type of a lease. Just like your bus leases or you're probably doing technology that way. It's exactly the same thing, but you can do it for facility improvements. And it becomes basically a general pledge of the district's operating budget. You're not pledging a particular revenue stream. You might be identifying it that way. You might say, I'm willing to designate CPPRT. Or we're willing to designate 800,000 of EBF. Or what you might tag something, but generally it's just a pledge of the district's operating. It's a first budget obligation.
Are there any advantages to doing that over the other options, or is it just a different way of doing the same thing?
I mean, districts do that because they don't have any debt service extension base. And there definitely are districts like that. They literally have no other option to borrow. And it doesn't require voter approval. Some districts have a lot of operating revenue flexibility, but not very much debt flexibility. So to them, it makes more sense to borrow this way.
Okay.
That was helpful, thank you. That cleared up a little for me anyway.
Sure, my pleasure. Anything else I can answer?
Is there any further questions?
Thank you so much for the additional information. We
Thank
appreciate
you.
it very much.
I would just like to take a moment and, I hope she was able to answer some of those higher level funding. I felt that she, being the expert, would be able to articulate that in a manner that maybe was more explanatory, I guess, to everyone. But I did want to just kind of put in caveat, I went ahead and pulled it up. I know I present it every year when we do our tax levy. The first year we abated taxes was 2014, and we started that abatement at 1.7 million for that year. It grew the next year to 2.2, and this last extension we did, we abated 3.9. So we are seeing steady increases in that. To date, with our 2023 tax abatement, we will have abated just over $27 million since 2014. So we are that community sales tax and that promise we made to taxpayers is impacting every time when we do our tax levy. And so I do want to keep that in the forethought, is that, yes, there are options for it, but we have honored that commitment that we made when this was passed in 2014, and we have been abating those taxes at considerably growth set mine rates. In 2020, we were only abating $2.5 million. We jumped $500,000 between 2020 and 2021, and again grew another 400,000 the next year and another 500,000. So as we see the economy change, we may see those numbers, you know, hedge back into that 2 million, maybe closer to that 3 million. But at this point, for this year alone, we had an expected revenue. We received, you know, $3.9 million in that sales tax. So it is a substantial revenue stream to help abate those taxes. And I just want to make sure that that stays in our forethought as well.
Well, it would be nice if those turned around, but as long as we still have to put eggs on layaway, I don't know that that's gonna happen anytime soon. It's crazy.
Are we gonna
That, so at this point, I mean, I think the administration received a lot of really good feedback at the special board meeting following the town hall. We spent a lot of time then preparing for this evening and making sure the board had the information that they needed. We would be happy to entertain any additional information that is needed for the board, and we will be working on restructuring and redesigning based on the board's feedback, what those scenarios look like, so you have some more information on that as well. But wondering if you have any additional feedback for us at this time, anything else you'd like us to get for you or share amongst yourselves?
Just in relation to funding the facilities master plan. Yeah, I'd like to look at some scenarios where, not that we use all of it, but we use at least a portion of the fund balance, because I think when you're spending your own money, you're a lot more careful with it when you're spending your grandkids' money. It's easy to spend money 20 years down the road because, yeah, it's 20 years down the road, we'll pay for it. I mean, it's like maxing out your credit card. But when you have to take it out of the bank, you look at it a little more judiciously than you did when you throw it on the plastic. So I think we can, a combination, or at least looking at some scenarios with both, I would like to see.
I think that that's excellent advice.
And just anything that either from the public hearing tonight, right, they could talk about, any other questions, any other needs?
Yep, again, we got the feedback regarding Early Childhood Center, we got the feedback regarding the Welcome Center, we got the feedback regarding the clinic. So we are aware of all the sort of board thoughts on that and how we might move forward on those pieces. Again, we'll be forthcoming.
So I had some concerns tonight based on some things that were shared tonight. Several people, and again, it is, I'm sure, a common occurrence in situations like this. I've not been on the board before, but I'm sure the sentiment is one that has, you know, happened before with other, you know, boards, was that, well, it's a foregone conclusion, it's, you know, it's an already done deal. But then they said some things, and different individuals who spoke said some things that, for me, were concerning because they seemed to validate the idea of that, which were, you know, the nurse being talked about being moved already next year, and a survey going out to families as soon as tomorrow to talk about student choice. I'm not saying that they indicated there was student choice for next year, but it's concerning to me to think that the sentiment already exists that it's a foregone conclusion and these are just a matter of, you know, requirement that we have to do these things, and I'm not saying it is a foregone conclusion, but those were things that seem to reiterate the idea that that's certainly a messaging I think is reasonable for people to infer, whether true or not. That I was concerned by is, I mean, the nurse at least stood up and spoke for herself, saying, you know, she's been talked to about being moved somewhere else next year. So that, you know, I can't imagine she got up and, you know, made that up. And then, you know, I have heard some things from folks who are saying about this survey going out about where Perry kids would want to go. I think that's premature, in my opinion. For a month from now, we'll be making a decision. I don't really know that it's gonna make a appreciable difference if we wait a month first, but.
So let me just speak to a couple of those things. Well, and I can't really speak to the situation with the nurse. Maybe Dr. Ady, you're able to speak to that? Do you know?
I don't have a lot of information. I know that Evelyn right now is looking at staffing buildings just based on need in that, and so I know that she's in the process of doing that right now.
Okay, so I can't speak to that particular spot. I can tell you that I do not believe this to be a foregone conclusion. I
Yeah,
don't
no, I'm not
believe
saying
the
it is. I'm
board
just saying that's the
believes it to
sentiment.
be a foregone conclusion. So anything we're doing to message that, we want to definitely not be doing. We did have the opportunity to meet with so I have shared with our elementary principals what it is that I would be sharing this evening, so that we would anticipate that if we were to close Perry, they would have the option to choose between those or among those 4 schools. In having that conversation, the elementary principals have shared that they're receiving calls from parents of Perry who wanted to see the buildings and understand what was there. So in conversation with some board members, and in conversation with Ms. Hornbeck, we thought it might be helpful not to have anyone choose their school, but to say, Perry families, if you want to see a school, we would be happy to arrange a tour for you so you could take a look at what some of those other schools are looking like. Not because we are trying to make this be a foregone conclusion, but because we know that there's some parent interest in that. So that was really what we were trying to coordinate for our families. If we want to hold off on that until, after May, when it might not be at all necessary, we are certainly happy to do that. We truly were trying to be responsive to what some of our parents were asking for. So that was really what the thinking was, not anything other than that. And we did even, I know Mrs. Hornbeck and I specifically talked about this. We said, the last thing we want to do is lead people to believe that this is a decision that is done. At the same time, we know our principals are getting phone calls and saying, what about this? What about this? What about this? So trying to navigate this period of time when our parents are experiencing some anxiety for the future, while also really being aware that we don't know what the future is going to be either. And we don't know what the board is going to decide at this point. And also being responsive to some board member concerns around that as well.
I think it's, if that stuff did happen, I don't know if it did or it didn't. I mean, somebody called me up and told me it did, but that doesn't mean it happened on the school nurse one.
Oh,
That
okay,
she was
yeah.
told last Friday that she's going to Washington and that they can get by with a part-time one there if they have to. Whether that happened or not, I don't know. The survey one, if it's not true, it's become an urban legend pretty quick. But to me,
Seems like
that is by far the wrong messaging. That if I'm a reasonable person and I heard both those two things, I'm looking at that as it's a done deal. You guys have already made up your mind. This is just superficial, because why would you do that whether you did that now or you did it in the end of May or the middle of May or whatever, I don't see why it's gonna make a significant, especially because those employees, like the school nurse, for example, we're gonna keep them. It's too late now anyway. It's past
They're
April.
one of our employees.
Yeah, it's one of our employees anyway,
Irregardless
so I mean,
of place.
we can move them wherever we want in May or June or whatever. To do it now and throw that out there now and this time seems to me to be throwing matches on kindling, but I mean, if it did happen.
Yeah, I definitely don't disagree with that. And again, I already spoke with Mrs. Hornbeck that, let's regroup on this. We don't want our families, we don't want to increase anxiety. We're trying to decrease anxiety. So that and it definitely was not ever indicated to be a survey of which school you would choose. That was never, ever what we were trying to do.
So, sort of moving past that, the information in your board updates, we had somebody tonight talk about dual language and potentially offering dual language at Perry. It looks like Perry has 51 English language learners this year. And my understanding is all of those kids go somewhere other than Perry, is that correct?
Yes, those Spanish-speaking kids that need access to
Bilingual
that
services.
program are going to be
And
going to
then
someplace else to receive that.
there are 15 lottery kids.
Correct.
Those are English speakers who
Correct.
opt in to Lincoln or Seth for
Correct.
dual.
If they
Um,
are selected in the lottery.
So my daughter was in dual, and my understanding is that you can't really offer it in a school as small as Perry because you need the English speaking children have to opt in. We don't require anyone who's a native speaker to be in dual. And it's also my understanding that best practices are that you have at least 2 sections of dual. Is that correct?
Well,
Grade level wise?
you would want to, Mr. Mandujano, do you want to speak to this? Since you are still in the room, you are definitely our expert.
Sure, so the model you're referring to is a two-way dual language program, right?
Yeah.
There is a such thing as a one-way dual language program, what we have at Washington and at Meehan. So it's difficult when you have one strand going all the way up because it's difficult for that person to plan because they have nobody to plan with. So again, it's just depending on what the thought would be. If you're looking at a one-way strand, it could be done. It's not that you need the 2 teachers to be done. However, you run into those problems where you just have one teacher teaching one grade level, doing the planning by themselves, not being able then to collaborate with the teacher because there's no one else. So usually this is where you would say, yes, you need at least 2 teachers to be able to plan a little bit better and have that opportunity than to have your PLC.
And the one-way immersion, or the one-way dual language programs, Lincoln and Washington have the one-way? Is that
Washington and Meehan.
Washington and Meehan, I'm sorry. Washington and Meehan have the one-way, and those kids are in a classroom with a teacher who speaks both Spanish and English.
Correct.
And
There's a few exceptions, but predominantly, yes.
And is the, like, generally speaking, and I know it can't be exactly the same as two-way dual because you don't have the piece of it where you've got native speakers of each language, but is the curriculum, is the, I guess, is the percentage of the day spent in English and Spanish similar to two-way?
It's the exact same. The only thing that changes between the 2 programs is the group of students that you
Okay.
have. With half of your students in a two-way dual language program are monolingual, the other half are ELs, or English language learners, and then in a one-way, the majority of them are all English language learners until they exit programming, and if they decide to remain to stay, then those kids then are considered former ELs or exits, which in a sense have proven English proficiency, which comparable to a to a English-speaking person coming in from a family.
Okay. All right.
A couple of things. There's still 2 teachers in both of those buildings by grade levels.
Yeah, that's
So there's not a single strand in either one of those. And then both Renee and I have had the opportunity a couple of times to look at Perry as well as Caledonia. And that pocket of 50-ish students never smoothly is in a particular even grade level. So you may have grade levels where there might be 4 kids, for example, that would be there, and then another grade level might have 15. So it's not a robust number the couple times that we've looked at it for Caledonia or Perry.
Right, and then the problem with that lies that you're essentially then, if you went that route at Perry, then you're displacing mono kids and might be pulling from that same pocket of students at some of the other larger schools that have current numbers, so then it's just shifting around, but then in theory would, and also obviously impact staffing, because either staff would have to be moved or we'd have to hire bilingual teachers to fill a strand at Perry.
Correct. And then I've got a question, this might be for Sean and Steve. So another piece of information we got in the board update was if the board decides to renovate Perry, what does that look like practically speaking? How long would it take? And could the construction be done while the building is operating, while it's open? And we were given sort of 3 approaches. The first one where you close the school and do all the construction probably in a year's time, and then you reopen the school. So the kids transfer out, go somewhere else for the year, transfer in, and it sounds like that one's the least expensive, the most efficient, but the most disruption to staff and students. And then you've got kind of the in-between choice where you try to do the construction while the school year is going on, maybe closing off part of the building, displacing some students perhaps into portables or maybe to other buildings. And the remaining kids have, and staff have noise and construction issues. And then you've got option 3, and that was where we only do work over the summer, and it takes a lot longer to get done, and that's the most expensive because you're not using today's dollars. So I guess my question is, have either one of you seen a situation similar to this where a district chose option 1, 2, or 3? How'd that work out? Do you have any thoughts on that, practically speaking?
Been involved with all 3.
Okay, good.
So, as a parent as well. So, I've done a lot of renovations where we were adding small additions. And the way we made that work was, the small additions ended up being mechanical spaces, for most part. Some of them had a couple classrooms or a small admin area or a secure entrance. And that happened during the school year, and it contained 1 or 2 areas around the building. And then during the summer, they have 9.5 weeks to bang out. And we recaptured new mechanicals. So all those mechanicals were set up, ready to go. Then we recaptured the old mechanical spaces, gutted them out, they became small group rooms, storage rooms, tech closets, whatever. They were literally driving Bobcats down the hallway. Part of the way we were able to do that is all those system connections were color-coded, and they were allowed to work off hours at night in the school, and they'd take 100 feet of hallway. Or they'd replace 2 windows in 4 classrooms, 2-story, most of them were 2-story buildings. They had to be done that night. You had to appear like you were never there the next day, or you lost the opportunity to do it. And they would work, and they would color code so that when they come through and do the demo, anything that's these 5 colors stays, anything else goes. And if the district didn't get everything moved out of the building in the first 3 days after school, and the demo wasn't done in 10 days, there was no way they were making the schedule. That was the linchpin. That happened for Schaumburg schools. We did 8 phases of that for their 30 buildings over multiple years. The easiest is obviously give them free rein of the building, right? It could be done in the calendar year. It would take us a year to plan that, so you wouldn't be doing it. I mean, we could do it for next summer, if that's what you wanted to do. Even if that included an addition, depending on the scale of an addition. But you'll kind of be adding some of that to make the elevators work anyway, if you go that route. That's the easiest, cheapest way. The other one, you're paying second shift time because they're working at night to do certain portions. Most of the buildings I was speaking about in that first phase ranged in, the elementaries were 65 to 72,000 square feet, and the middle schools were 80 to 110. Obviously, Perry's a much smaller building at 26, so very achievable. I've been through a renovation where, as a parent of the school and a wife who's a teacher in the building, where we took a junior high, a 3-grade junior high, completely changed the entrance, took 1 of the 3 gyms away and made it into 2 music spaces, put an addition on for a library, recaptured the library as a fitness space and some support spaces, and took a junior high and created 3, 6, 7th, 8th grade houses, and they function like true middle school houses, not junior high. But that was 2 years and 3 summers, and the building stayed occupied the entire time. Were the students and staff walking on concrete sometimes? Yeah, certain portions of the building, it was just raw concrete for a while. 6 or 7 bases. But it was fully occupied the whole time, and there was disruption, there was dust, but it was kept to a minimum. So all 3 of those are viable. They all cost differently if you're gonna repurpose them. And, you know, the challenge with Perry is it is a multi-story building. Instead of that junior high was 1 story. Most are only 2 stories. We've kind of got a hybrid of what's going on there. But we have smaller square footage to deal with. But we also have a smaller site. So a chunk of that site will have to be a staging area, no matter what you do. And there'll be contractors that are gonna be wanting to be parking there, and there's gonna be disruption to the neighborhood too, in the community, no matter which option you move forward. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, that was good. The estimated costs that show up on our slideshow, which option are those costs based on?
The easiest option.
So 1, close it for a year, do the work,
The most
and
efficient way.
reopen.
Yeah, and I would say that, you know, you're also looking at a year out, probably, if you do that. I'm not assuming anything.
Sure.
So you're probably gonna have some escalation on those numbers anyway. For, you know, probably somewhere between 5 and 7% to be a year out, give or take. We'll see where that market comes in at right now. But yeah, we're basing that primarily on the lower end, especially on, because we give you a range.
Right.
So the lower end of that range is definitely giving them free rein of the building. The higher end is probably more of the hybrid, where you could be occupying it and you might have to shift some things around. The benefit that we had at that junior high project, for example, that was a conversion, there wasn't a lot of extra space. I mean, we have nearly 950 kids in that middle school, but we put the additions on first so that we had areas to kind of temporarily shift people within the footprint. We didn't have to use mobiles. And if we decided that, hey, we do need a little additional space for one thing or another, that might be a way to shift classes so that we phase things in depending on the level of renovation that you do. The lower end of those numbers, so there's 2 numbers in there really. There's the facility assessment pieces, which are MEP and roof. Those you want to do over the summer. We can't be swinging stuff over occupied buildings. We don't want to expose them to weather, all those types of things. Those have to be focused as summer projects. But renovating the classrooms, replacing casework, those can be purchased, stored, and staged so that, hey, we're just going to take these 2 classrooms. If we have a place to move them for 4 weeks, maybe still on property, then they can do that in a phased approach. There's a way to do that. It will cost a little more. It'll take a little more time, but not as long as the whole thing. And that's more towards the higher end of that range.
In my previous district, we did extensive remodeling. In one elementary, we changed the entire HVAC system. And we did it while the building was open. And we wanted to bring in a couple of relocatables. But the one thing with that was about an 8-month project. There were some downfalls to that. But this building was 3 times the size of Perry. The one thing with a smaller building is that no matter what you do, you have a bigger impact on the entire building. Yeah. So that's just one thing, I guess, that's in mind. And, you know, and he's right. When you do have remodeling of that magnitude, there's a lot of support structure around the building. And one of the things that we had to do was really fence off a lot of the area. We didn't have that big of a playground there. And the kids did come up multiple times about lack of green space to play for that winter.
Sure.
So to that end, and the information that you've provided, and you asked what feedback we could provide, if it's possible to get some references, not references, but names of these programs that they have done this with, in these various 3 approaches, that administration has the ability to talk with those schools and say, how did it go? What were the pitfalls? What were the having those names to, ask about their experience with that sort of a project would be maybe helpful. Obviously, that's only going to matter if the vote is affirmative to keep Perry open, but it would be, I think perhaps vetting that out would be beneficial maybe to board members who don't yet know what they're going to do, and then also maybe reassuring to the Perry community that every effort was being made to present a balanced approach to options and how schools have experienced those when, you know, remodeling has been greenlit and, you know, whether it was to close a school or just expand or add on, I think, you know, perhaps that would send an affirmative message to them as well, that every possibility and option is being presented to the board to inform equally to the remain open as the, you know, problems that exist that would spur closing.
I think the other thing to me too would be what the viewpoint of the structural effectiveness of the building is. Like, let's just say we redid it for the sake of argument. Is that an effective? Do we get an effective education thing out of it? Like, we've delayed a lot of maintenance on Perry. I mean, over the years, stuff probably should have been done, didn't get done. So even though the cost is high now, we saved a lot of money later. Like, somebody dropped off something the other day. Roof was done in 1997 by McDermott with a 5-year warranty. So that means the warranty ended 22 years ago. So the fact we haven't done anything with the roof in 22 years leads me to think that somebody probably thought of something about that roof sometime in the last 22 years. We just didn't do it for whatever reason it was, and some of the other stuff. So I'm thinking that, okay, that may factor in. I'm not saying it'd be a deal breaker one way or the other, but it would be nice to know how much of that delayed maintenance we had that might have added up to like $1 million. I'm not saying it's gonna be that much. I'm just throwing stuff out that really that stuff we should have done a long time ago anyway and didn't. And now we realize the savings then because we didn't want to spend, because whatever reason, I have no idea what it was. But for whatever reason is that really that's kind of a cost we could include on subtracting from what we think we'd have to spend now, because that's what we should. We've done that to any other building besides Perry. A lot of our other buildings we fixed and maintained. We just didn't do it there for whatever reason.
Well, I mean, I think we know the reason why it wasn't done. I mean, I've been on the board now for 11 years, and before I started on the board, when Kishwaukee closed, Perry was on the list of options to close, and that wasn't the first time it was talked about. I mean, since I moved here, people have been talking about, and staff and parents have been concerned about the future of Perry, because once a building gets to a certain age, I mean, let's all be honest, I mean, no one was unaware of how old Perry was. I don't think that staff, and that's staff over that long period of time, and boards over that period of time were just forgot about the Perry roof or forgot about the Perry boilers. I mean, there were conscious decisions made, not at our level that I'm aware of, but I'm sure at staff levels, that we don't know how much longer this building is going to be open. Let's defer maintenance on it. So whether that was right or wrong, I mean, I can't pretend that that's not probably true. And none of our other buildings are close to being that old. So I think the other buildings got more attention than Perry, and I'm not trying to justify that or say whether it was right or wrong, but that certainly has contributed to it.
Or whatever happens here, I think that's probably a very fair observation and a fair analysis. I certainly hope both for the board that's here now, as well as you pointed out a couple of meetings ago, or at least one, maybe it was just the March meeting, probably a different board than us will make more of these decisions than we will. I hope they learn from that, you know, some of these things, if they hadn't been deferred, just as you talked about, if we wait another year, costs will go up 5 to 7%. Well, I think if we'd been doing these things at Perry 10 years ago, they wouldn't be as costly as they are today. So I think it's a good, a good warning to say, you know, if we don't learn from history, we're doomed to repeat it. And we, should make it that future boards too should be charged with, not allowing things to get, not allow the can to get kicked this far down the road, because maybe one day, possibly if, and administrations as well, obviously not just boards, but, Perry paying the price for that seems yet another something that feels, wrong, in my opinion.
I had two questions that I wrote down previously on not connected topics, what we're just talking about, but I know there was some discussion about the clinic at the last meeting, so I guess for me, I'd like to know, I know kind of Welcome Center was taken off the table for me, for the clinic, I'd like to know a little bit more about like the use over time, and I would believe there's some cost savings in that, so like if we could see any cost saving metrics in relation to that versus people having to go elsewhere, I feel like that could help me in some further determinations in relation to the clinic. And then my second is, I know one of the parents spoke about it tonight and did at the last meeting, and I guess I have questions in relation to prioritization for families. I know you had mentioned that in the event we were to close Perry, there would be 4 schools that they could select from. So I guess I'd like to know a little bit more about the process, because I'm wondering how that will work. Is that going to be like a date time stamp situation? You know, if families are all putting in requests, how are those families prioritized, right? If everybody wants Lincoln, let's say, you know, and there's only a certain number of seats, what does that look like? So that would be helpful for me to know as well.
And there was just one, I just wanted to clarify, I think I understood you to say that if Perry does close, and say there's a second grader at Perry currently, and then that second grader has a little brother who's 3 when Perry closes, and that second grader chooses to go to Seth Whitman, that 3-year-old, once they start school, could follow their siblings' choice path, or not? Is it only the kids who are currently in the school?
Currently
Okay.
enrolled, so it would be siblings follow siblings if they are currently enrolled.
If they're currently enrolled, okay.
Otherwise, it
where do you cut it off?
So then if they did have younger kids to that point and didn't know, the default would be Washington, and then they would know, like, if I choose that, then my non-in-school age kids, yeah, that's where they would go also.
Correct, but the board would really have to, you know, if a decision was made to close Perry, then we would come back to the board with decisions around boundaries. So we should have a decision around boundaries prior to any families having to make decisions. So that would definitely be the target that people would know. So if I have a younger sibling, this is where I should go, because that's where the boundary will be drawn.
Has any consideration been given to the possibility that a kindergartner who's coming in, right, wouldn't go to Perry in this, plan to close Perry, then they could have an already school age 2nd or 3rd grade, student in the school now at Perry. Has there been any consideration to accommodating the requests of moving all of those kids at the same time? And then what does that do to prioritizing the remaining families? So if I have a kindergartner coming in and they're gonna go over to Seth this year, then would I have the ability to say, obviously, as much as I didn't want Perry to close and as much as I don't wanna leave Perry, I want all my kids to move at one time.
Like
I don't wanna have
sibling
kids here
priority.
and I don't wanna have kids over there.
That's what I was kind of asking too, like priority first, but then it's like, does it become in future years a sibling priority of sorts?
Well, and I'm saying if that sort of, I mean, I hate to put it this way, but then if I have a kindergartner and a 3rd grader, for example, and I take a spot for my kindergartner and 3rd grader at Seth, because they're allowed to do that, then those kids who don't have a kindergartner this year suddenly become second priority, right? Because already 2 seats are available, or at least one has, and there could be multiple of kids that are doing that. So I just don't know. I absolutely believe, regardless of, what I think about a number of things in this process, I do genuinely believe the intent is there to allow for school choice for as many as there possibly can be. But I don't think it's gonna be an experience that most people really do really realize that. There's gonna be everybody at the trough at the same time, and how many are gonna get fed at what, where they wanna go, and I think there's so many factors that disrupt that I feel like I know we're saying if we can accommodate, I think it's gonna be real hard to accommodate, because I think people told us here tonight, these kids are gonna wanna move together as much as possible, and we have to face the fact that that is not going to happen. That we're not gonna be able to take a school, the entire third grade and say, great, there's room for the entire third grade at X school. And it's just not realistic. And there was one other person, someone said tonight, I think the very first man who spoke, while I don't wanna pick the bones of Perry, and I don't wanna see people pulled from there when we, if God forbid this is the decision that's made, I don't wanna see us be, moving people right away, but, I do believe we'll keep everybody. I absolutely know that is not just the intent, but will be the experience of teachers. But they're gonna wanna start to know where and, what and what, all of those things sooner rather than later. And with waiting a year to close Perry, which at the least we should do, that's, we said we didn't wanna keep them hanging, right? That we wanted to make a decision because we don't wanna, and that's true, I get it. But there's still a whole lot of people that are gonna be kept hanging in a lot of ways, not about whether it stays open or closed, but how they are affected based upon where kindergartners will go next year, whether their older kids can follow, what school they might end up in a future year. I just think it's important that we tell the truth about the fact that there's still gonna be a whole lot of people up in the air for a while, if that decision is made.
Yeah, I think all of those things are true, and I don't think there's any way to get around that it's gonna be a stressful, difficult situation. Should that decision be made.
Anybody we haven't heard from, anything?
Yeah, I have some additional questions for Mr. Steve Nelson. With those, when you did those projects and say call it Schaumburg, where there were 8 phases, or the other projects, you said you had worked in all 3 of the different scenarios. Were those 100-year-old buildings?
Most of the Schaumburg ones were late 60s, early 70s.
Okay.
They did close a couple of buildings from the 40s and 50s, consolidated a couple, but they had 30 buildings, and they were K-8 district. The middle school was Sycamore Middle School. I was on the board. My wife's a teacher, and my kids are in the building. So I experienced it on a number of levels. So that's Sycamore. So that building was also, I think, the first part of that was built in the 60s, and the addition went on in the 80s. We have done some other buildings, closed other buildings in Bureau Valley. Those were from the 19-teens. And literally I could see through the foundation wall and touch the dirt. And I said, you have to get kids out of the building today, because I don't know when this is gonna collapse. So they had to, they brought in mobiles, put them in mobiles for a year while we got an addition built at another school facility. They had multiple 5 locations. So they decided where they wanted it, and that's what we went through that process. That was from the 90s. Both of those were like a girls and boys tower. That's how they did them. And then they were connected with a 1950s addition. So they kept that addition. The towers came down. They were demolished. Indian Creek, we came in right after they had built a new building, and we took down their old building. That's in Waterman, down south of DeKalb County. And right now, Putnam County, 535, they are a true county school-wide. They're a very small county now. They have all the schools in the district, and they're putting it on the referendum for this fall, and they're closing 2 buildings of 4. And they're consolidating those 2 buildings onto one that was built just about 9 or 10 years ago, and then putting a small addition on their high school. So they will have a K-8 facility and a high school facility that are on 2 sites right next to each other, divided by a road. The buildings that are coming down, that will come down or will be sold, one or the other, one's also from the late 60s, and one's got 6 different additions on it, but the original building, which they have condemned the 2nd floor on already, they don't even use the 2nd floor, is around 1920, roughly. And then we also work for Lamoille School District, which has a building older than yours. And it functions as their junior high now. They got elementary kids because they took a small building and closed it. It was very remote. That building was built in 1884. And they've maintained it well, but it has challenges, and it does not have an elevator, and they've got some issues, but they're trying to do their best to maintain it. Because they're a very small district. Their bonding capacity, they can't afford to build a building without a huge rep run. There's no chance for them to.
Right. 100-year-old building, 100+, right, split over. Challenges with opening the walls, floors, asbestos type containing materials. Are we then able to phase in and keep working on that, or are you gonna have to just work on it during the summers? Because you can't open that stuff up with students.
Depends on which approach that we outlined earlier.
Yeah.
You wanna go with, but yeah, there's gonna be challenges with it, cause it's a solid masonry building, it's not cavity wall like we build now.
Mhm.
The structure is, 125 plus years old, so, we may find some things in there, there may be some things buried structurally, that we will find, that are unknown right now. So yeah, I would go into that project with a reasonably healthy contingency for unforeseen conditions, just as a safety factor. You don't use it, you don't spend it, you don't have to. It's just there as a cushion from a budget standpoint for Joanne. Yeah, there'll be definite challenges. I know the building that they're looking at in Putnam County, has 3 ceilings in it. And he goes, we don't really know what's above the third one, because no one can get to it without taking the other 2 down. We don't want to do that, so they just added over years. So he goes, I know that there's something up there, because every kid that comes out of the building seems to have an allergy. So we just gotta move on from that building, basically. But yeah, there will be challenges, more so than a 1950s building or a 1980s building or anything like that, certainly. You just don't have as much, mechanical space that's been allotted, because they may have had literally radiators there on the wall and a steam pipe system. So there's gonna be challenges, and the rooms are already small, we know that, but it can be done, if that's the direction that you wanna go. That's completely up to you guys. So, but there will be some challenges, and we would budget, and normally preliminarily, we set aside about a 10% contingency, and as we hone in on the construction drawings, we usually feel a lot more comfortable going down to about a 5% contingency. I don't think I would do that on a building, any building, not just Perry, any building of that age. I think I would hold something in the 10 to 12 range just to be safe, and then if you don't spend it, then it can be reallocated.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Anything else?
No, I think you answered it. Thank you, Steve.
Holly?
Yeah, the questions I wrote down from the public hearing you addressed, so thank you for that. I kind of wanted to shift gears a little bit and just talk about the people that came tonight and spoke. I remember I was there 10 years ago, and it's not an easy thing to do, and I just want to thank everybody. It's not a foregone conclusion in my mind. I just want everyone to understand that. And there's a lot of people out there probably listening at home to this and maybe don't feel comfortable coming and speaking in a meeting or at 2 of the hearings we have left. So please, I don't want to speak for the whole board, so I'm going to tell you to email me, because I do want to hear what you say, and I do listen. And I think it's important that the people that aren't able to be here and don't feel comfortable speaking need to be heard as well. So I just encourage that feedback from anyone listening.
Yeah, I think it's important. I think whether you think it's a done deal or not, let your voice be heard. I mean, you never know. I mean, you got nothing to lose.
We were asked quite a bit today by children, whether they would be allowed to speak.
Yeah, sure,
Absolutely.
absolutely.
No, I mean, I think there would be no reason that we wouldn't wanna hear from kids, absolutely.
Like, please have them come with their parents.
Yes, that
Not
would
just
be
like
great.
drop them off,
Coffee and a latte.
Yeah, right.
I would say too, that I know we brought this up before, but I think we ought to be really, really, really judicious about information we send out now, at least before we actually make a decision on it. Because I'm not saying your intent was to do that at all, but it sure doesn't look good. I mean, if I'm a reasonable person, I think I am most of the time, I'd look at that and I'd say, yeah, you don't do that stuff when you're gonna keep it open. So, I'm not saying it was done on purpose, I just think we
Well,
need to
it
really be
certainly
careful about what we
was
do from
not
now on.
whatsoever the intent, so I appreciate the feedback, and like I said, we discussed it specifically, and we'll regroup on that tomorrow. Nothing has gone out at this time, so.
I was wondering if So I know I've referenced the information you gave us in our board update a few times tonight. I wonder if some of that information might be useful to add to the little presentation. I assume you plan to do that little presentation before each public hearing?
I do.
There might, some of the questions that were asked tonight, I think, are answered in that information. So I think that would be good. Hopefully the board got a chance to look at it, review some of the data that was provided. There were a lot of good questions asked, and I think there's a lot of useful information in there. So if we could get some of that on the presentation, I think that'd be great.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I liked the cadence of, in the board update, putting the responses to any of our questions so we could all hear each other's and then get the answers to that too.
Yep, absolutely. And we'll have a little bit more time between our meetings this time too, so I think we'll be able to be, to make those decisions in a little bit better fashion as well.
Any further discussion items at this time?
Thanks for being here, Steve. Appreciate it.
Yeah. All right.
You too.
I would now like to turn the meeting over to Dr. Shug for administrative reports.
Okay. I suspect people aren't wanting a lengthy superintendent's comments. If I'm going to read the room, I'm just going to quickly highlight a couple things. We have communication boards installed at all of our elementary school playgrounds. They are amazing and utilized. Registration is open until April 30th. Please register.
Oh, and people don't have to pay right now.
Yes.
Like, just
Correct,
register.
just
You don't have to pay right
register.
now.
Keep scrolling. I did that one last month. Thank you to the paraprofessionals. We had Paraprofessional Day, and yes, yay, thank you. April 17th will be the Multicultural Fair at Belvedere Central Middle School. It's fantastic. I encourage you to stop in if you can. And we had Mismatched Sock Day for World Down Syndrome Day, and it was fabulous to celebrate all those little kiddos. So that's my superintendent comments. Strategic plan updates. Again, I'm not going to go through this whole presentation, but if you would like to see the updates, I know we had some questions tonight about what's happening with the strategic plan. This is up every month. And can be checked on the website and also can be checked here and talks through what we're working on in each one of these goal areas. And so I won't walk through those tonight again because of time, but should you ever have any questions on the strategic plan, we're really trying to make sure everybody has access to that information regularly. We are also going to introduce tonight for the first time our financial updates. We have, I know, had several questions about the finances of the district and long-range planning, and are we being, sort of thoughtful when we bring things before the board about what the whole budget picture looks like. So Joanne has created some new reports to help us really see the variance year to year to year and see exactly where we are in every budget year, as well as where we are moving toward. So again, I don't know that tonight we want to walk through all of this information, but please click in there, know that it's there, and know that that's going to become a regular feature of the board meeting. So you are aware that we are always keeping in mind that budget big picture, even though things might feel like they come to you piecemeal. There is a vision for that, and we are keeping track of that. So,
one
of
really
course you
brief-
can.
Brief,
Yes,
brief
please.
comment.
You
So I
created
just-
this report, you deserve to make a
No,
comment.
I want to go home just like everybody else. But I do want people to recognize there are 5 pages to this report. So the first one is the revenue year to date, and it shows the last 3 years where we've kind of been. Some of those you're going to see fluctuations as we change the reporting. On the federal revenue, the big swings are when we do our grant claims, and so that's a big contingent. There is a narrative kind of at the inside at the bottom of the report that kind of gives you where some of those differences are, and it does give you some of that breakout. The second page is the exact same report, but on the expense side, so you can see where we're trending over year, where we're spending more money. I do want to remind everybody for last year and this year, just take into impact that the ESSER funds started going away, so you have a lot more claims, a lot more expenses in those sites that we would expect to see those start to drop down a little bit. The next 2 pages are the same reports, but only for the month to date. So this takes March from the previous years to March of this current year. So it's looking at that revenue and expenditure. The final report was one I did actually kind of find a way to do that gives you, I take it with a grain of salt, please, with this fund balance overview that shows you month over month what's going on with our fund balance over year to year. So it does definitely fluctuate with cash flow, with tax payments. So I'm hoping at a future meeting, we will not be as time constrained and I can kind of dive into this a little bit, but please, please, please take a look at it. If you have questions, if you want clarification on any of it, this is the format that I'm hoping to kind of move forward with. And hopefully it's a little more user-friendly than just the rows and rows of Excel data that you're seeing.
I like
So-
this a lot more from a non-finance person.
Yeah, this is great.
And I would like to spend some more time, on a regular cadence, talking through this, or you giving us some of the highlights, so.
Look at
And
the-
I do
Thanks for
plan
doing
on taking this to business
That's what I was
services
gonna
as a
ask.
standing agenda item.
Good.
After I
That would be
present
good.
them at the
Yeah.
board, they will be actually presented in a little more in-depth to the business services. So it will be an ongoing board report. So
Thank you.
this report that you have today will be presented at the April 30th business services with some in-depth conversations there.
Thank you.
Look at the fund balances on May 31st and you'll see consistency. I mean, that's usually the low point of low points, typically.
The end of the end.
Well, that's before you get your taxes.
So thank you for allowing me those few minutes.
Oh, no, thank you for all the work you've done to prepare this. I think it'll really help us keep that big picture in mind as a whole and know that that is actually happening behind the scenes as well. Any questions on any of those reports? All right, I tried to do them in record time, so thank you guys.
Okay. Anything as far as for the rest, school activity reports, department highlights, FOIA log, or upcoming events, any questions in relation to any of those for Dr. Shuck? All right, hearing none at this time, is there a motion to adjourn the meeting?
So moved.
Member Herrera made a motion, and Member Hauk seconded the motion to adjourn the meeting. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Meeting adjourned at 10:02.
Here we go.